Elder Scrolls 6 may be making a mistake, and I actually think this has to do with traditional development versus something that we have seen be very successful for games like Baldur's Gate 3. I believe that Elder Scrolls 6 should launch in early access, and many have already made jokes, responding and saying, well, don't all Bethesda games launch in early access? And I do think there's a bit of accuracy blended with humor in saying that, but I also think games are just getting far too big. The systems are becoming far too complex to just dig in for 5+ years, 6 years, and then you release your game hoping that the public likes all the decisions you made along the way. Decisions you made very early in development will affect the entire trajectory of the game, and hopefully people like that because you can't easily change or fix that. We've learned recently that they are actually already testing very early playable versions of Elder Scrolls 6. So I thought this would be a good time to just talk about why I think they should leverage early access. I've been a big proponent of this. More games, especially larger games that you hope will last, using early access. I don't think you need to always use this, but I do think it's going to become, or it could become, a growing trend to help these larger projects land successfully. Now, I put all of my thoughts right here up at the front, and then I discuss it with a live audience. So that's why the video is longer, but you don't have to go searching for sort of my thoughts on it. I put it in the form of a monologue right here at the beginning. Now, if you don't want to miss out on the live streams, make sure you hit subscribe, hit the bell button, hit the like button. All those things help out the channel, and if you want to help the channel directly with the membership, pick that $6 member tier. You'll get into my extra content. Should Elder Scrolls 6 launch in early access? So, is traditional development just not suited for open world RPGs that just continue to grow in size and complexity? Based on recent things that we've heard about Elder Scrolls 6, they already have playable builds, very early playable builds. I'm actually worried they're going to make the mistake of not leveraging something that very clearly helped one of the biggest games recently, Baldur's Gate 3. The depth and the complexity and the freedom in Baldur's Gate 3 would not have been possible without early access. Now, I've argued in other places the same thing for Diablo 4. I think it would have been greatly helped by early access as well. Once the game's out, it's just too big to make system-wide changes in an effective way. It's sort of like trying to turn an aircraft carrier. So I want to walk through some recent things that we have learned about what they're doing with this game. They already have playable versions, and we know they're probably going to be setting their sights on a very large and ambitious game, but there's also just some commentary about the release windows, things that we learned from the FTC trial. And I want to look at the early access idea and what it brings to the table for games like Baldur's Gate 3 and what it could do for Elder Scrolls 6. And I want to sort of compare that to traditional development and what that might look like for Elder Scrolls. Then I'm going to sort of end by making some of my predictions. Many are going to push back. They're going to be like, this is out of the question. They're never going to do this. Why would you say that they should do this? Bethesda's just not going to be even allowed to consider that. So what have we heard? So Bethesda took to Twitter to sort of celebrate 30 years of Elder Scrolls. And in the post, they confirmed that they haven't just begun working on Elder Scrolls 6, but that they have early builds. And they said, quote, even now, returning to Tamriel and playing early builds has us filled with the same joy, excitement, and promise of adventure. So for some, this might be exciting. And for those hoping for an engine change, probably not so much. Like many people have said that they need to get away from the creation engine, but I don't think Bethesda at this point can. It's probably out of the question. There's just too many years of institutional knowledge to just suddenly switch engines, because people have been kind of pulling for that ever since Fallout 4. That's been a part of the discussion, and I think that discussion got more footing when Starfield came out. I do think the engine's age did start to show up the most in Starfield. Now, hopefully they can learn some good lessons, and since they're just sort of building one world, it might be quite a bit more handcrafted, and they can sort of return to their Bethesdian roots. And when it comes to the release date, we actually have some things that came out of the FTC trial. First, there was a chart that showed Xbox's sort of post-acquisition plans for Bethesda, and Elder Scrolls was listed as a game that would land in 2026 or later. Now, this same chart chart also had a checkbox, and there was an X in it, and it indicated that Elder Scrolls 6 would not be landing on PlayStation. Now, since then, we have had pretty strong claims from Tom Warren of The Verge that Elder Scrolls 6 will not be an Xbox exclusive, and it will land on PlayStation day one. This is sort of given all the changes and the brand pivot for Xbox. I don't find what Tom's saying surprising. A game of this size and scope, if you look at the history of Bethesda games on PlayStation, it just makes sense. This is kind of driving one of my thoughts behind why I believe that Starfield will eventually end up on PlayStation. But during the FTC trial, Phil Spencer gave a very different release window than that document and that chart and what it indicated. At the time, Phil would not give a definitive answer about platforms either, which is really interesting. He said, quote, "With Elder Scrolls 6, it's so far out, it's hard to understand what platforms it will even be at this point. It's the same team that's finishing Starfield, which comes out this September, so we're talking about a game that's like 5+ years away." So he made these remarks in 2023, so Elder Scrolls 6 is probably on course for a 2028 release or later, which I think sounds way better than 2026. 4 or 5 years for a game of this size, that's likely what they're going to need. If they're going to want, minimum time frame for excellence, you're going to need Elder Scrolls 6 to cook for at least 5 years. But given that we do have 2 potential launch windows and launch targets, could 2026, could that work as an early access launch, right? And at this point, I just think it's undeniable. I think there's an ample amount of evidence that Baldur's Gate 3 achieved a level of freedom and of excellence that's not really been seen or found in any other RPGs in the market. To this day, I still see clips, examples of things that people are discovering and doing, and they're just enjoying the depth of just a big, massive game. And we also have to give credit where credit is due. The game handily won Game of the Year and a handful of other game awards. Games of this size and having dev cycles this long, it's an enormous risk to gamble with those foundational decisions. Much of what was criticized in Diablo 4 could have been avoided with respect to the skill trees. They were just too linear. They were very boring. And that could have been alleviated. That could have been avoided if people were playing the game in its, an earlier state. Maybe just build Act 1, but let people play with all that. So much of the game is built upon those systems. Your loot tables, your end game leveling, the enemies themselves, things like the Paragon boards. It's all connected. So moving or adjusting anything requires a massive amount of work. RPG systems are complex. If just one ability is adjusted, any weapon, any armor piece, or passive ability that interacts with that one ability would then also need to be potentially adjusted or bug tested. That's just one ability. If you think about all the abilities and all the various things you can spend skill points in, it's usually just one ability is like a spider web in connections to all of these other things. So beyond just the internal logistics of making changes, we've been hearing a lot about game budgets lately as well. The projects and the games aren't just getting bigger, the budgets are getting bigger as well. And so studios decide to build a game of this size and scope, like Elder Scrolls, you simply have to nail it. You can't end up with the Cyberpunk, okay? You're going to often hear people bring up how many copies of Cyberpunk sold, acting like, well, it wasn't really a disaster. They sold a ton of copies. They made a ton of money. CD Projekt Red's stock value still has not recovered. It was close to $25 a share before Cyberpunk, and even after the redemption arc that Cyberpunk has been on, they're still sitting at $7 a share. That's a huge, massive amount of loss. That level of loss is felt not just by the company, but by the shareholders as well. They had to settle with their shareholders, okay? I can't help but think that Elder Scrolls 6 has even more on the line. It's a more well-known title. It's like almost monolithic in the history of games. Now, some are going to push back and they're going to say, listen, a game this big, executives are just not going to allow for early access. They're going to push for heavy marketing, heavy pre-order incentives, and they're going to try to make as much money as possible. That's probably correct. I don't think anybody saying that is wrong. But it's also directly related to games not reaching their full potential because they're being treated like products instead of art projects. So let me be clear with what I think. I strongly believe that Elder Scrolls 6 should launch in early access. I really do fear that traditional development will not work. Imagine building all of the skill trees and foundational loot systems, and then you just create the opening area, all right? The amount that they would learn from just a month of player feedback would be worth its weight in gold. Now, no matter how much internal testing you do, no matter how much market research you do, you will never be able to achieve what you can learn in just 48 hours of public gameplay from millions of players. Now, this would enable the devs to craft the mid-game and the end-game in a far better way. I remember reading a book where the author gave an example of they were flying a small plane and dropping off medical supplies in various countries. I believe they were flying in Africa. And basically the pilot would every once in a while let him steer the plane. And the pilot would get very stern if the trajectory was off just by a little bit, okay? This was because a slight miscalculation by a few degrees would put them in the wrong country, right? They could get shot down. Anything could happen. They could get lost. They could run out of fuel. In similar fashion, design choices made for the foundations of a game, they can show up as mistakes or miscalculations, oftentimes when it's just too late. The game's built. All the parts of the game are now intertwined. You can't just press undo. I believe the expectations for games like Elder Scrolls are simply too high to use traditional development. All the decisions they make when they're making those foundational choices, those could be miscalculations. And you don't know they're miscalculations until the game is in the hands of the public 5 or 6 years later, because it took that long for those arcs to take root. So allow me to make some predictions. If they go with traditional development, I fear we're going to get another Starfield. I mean that. I think Starfield largely felt like Fallout 5. Entire systems were just lifted carbon copy from Fallout. Those who were praising Starfield for its innovation had clearly never played Fallout 4 or Skyrim. And it's my belief that traditional development is just not suited for games of this size. It's just going to lead to them playing it safe. This is one of the reasons that we see a lot of sequels right now, a lot of remasters, a lot of remakes. The bigger the budget, the bigger the game, the less risk that they're going to be willing to take. And I really can't blame companies for this. You've got to survive. You've got to make profit if you want to keep your doors open. My prediction is that if they were to do early access, they could do far more iterating and innovating. Imagine the number of classes that they're likely going to have in a game like Elder Scrolls 6. Think of the creativity, the innovation, and the new ideas that they could bring to the RPG genre. They've made such an impact on open-world RPGs, they could do it again. That's far more likely to happen in an early access environment. Do you think Larian would have been able to offer the level of freedom and the creativity that players have if they would have just built Baldur's Gate 3 traditionally? Or even other games, like Hades as an example. They went through a lot of major changes when they were in early access, and it helped them launch a game that got a lot of recognition and a lot of awards. And they're also planning on releasing Hades 2 in early access. So clearly it works. And I think it would be an undeniable benefit for a game like Elder Scrolls 6. But that's just what I think. What do you think? So let me give you my sort of closing thoughts and conclusions here to transition into, talking to the live audience. While I know early access for Elder Scrolls 6 is probably unlikely, okay, I still maintain that it would help. I could certainly see executives bristling at the idea, and there's a lot of risk involved when you let the public see an incomplete product. But if it becomes more commonplace in the market, it might not be so risky. Palworld landed on Xbox in early access, and it took the world by storm. Nobody was like, oh, I can't believe you're putting an early access game on console. Certainly expectations for existing franchises might be a bit different, okay? But leveraging the brand recognition of Elder Scrolls, that actually could maybe work in the game's favor if you put it out there in early access. The second thing I want to say is I expect to get a lot of pushback on this. Many are going to strongly be against releasing incomplete products and charging money for them. Well, that's kind of happening now anyway, isn't it? Dragon's Dogma 2 is not complete. It's not ready for market. It's not optimized. It's running terribly. Rise of the Ronin also feels like it needed another 3 to 6 months of polish and optimization for its inconsistent performance. Last year, there was Jedi Survivor, and it still isn't in a good state on PC. Paying less for early access and getting to shape a game and influence where it ends up, especially when you know what you're signing up for, that sounds like a win-win to me. It sounds far better than paying $70 for a game only to find out after the fact that the thing wasn't ready to come to market. Now, I understand why others would have no interest in this. Like, they don't want to touch or see a game until it is complete, right? They don't want to feel like a beta tester. Well, we kind of feel like beta testers lately when we buy games only to find out that all their performance issues were glossed over by review outlets or largely ignored, or day one patches don't quite make a dent into all those issues. My conclusion is this. Starfield honestly feels like Bethesda's Cyberpunk moment, okay? It's their weakest game with respect to consumer response when you look at the scores. People were going back to older Bethesda games. Older Bethesda games had larger player bases on Steam after a certain amount of time. The shadow of Skyrim and Fallout sort of looms large over the studio, but I could actually see Starfield getting into a much better place. The last 2 patches have literally addressed hundreds upon hundreds of bugs and problems, and if they can shift and pivot from bug squashing to focusing on quality of life issues and giving this game its 2.0 moment, as well as, sort of timing that when they launch the DLC, I think you could see confidence in Bethesda start to rise. And that could be a great runway for Elder Scrolls 6, but it could also be a great runway for early access. Developer transparency is risky, but so is building a massive game for 5+ years and you just drop it on the public, and you really hope that what you thought were good ideas 5 years ago is what players still want today. Expectations and player behavior change and they shift over time. It can be hard to predict. And if that's the context that they're building Elder Scrolls 6 in, I don't see them making any strides for the franchise or the genre. It's time for more devs to start working with players, not against them. This us versus them mentality is just unhealthy. But those are just my thoughts. Now it's time to hear your thoughts. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I had right there at the end, like an eyelash or a hair. It was like poking me in the eye, and I was like, I can't go digging in my eye in the middle of the monologue. Guys, do me a favor and smash that like button. We appreciate you being here so much. Let's get those first 100 likes. It looks like we already have people gifting members. You guys have got a pretty big member jump that you're going to need this week for the goal. Alex, Han shot first, and so did you. Alex is the first gifted member, and Skatinator comes behind him and gifts the second one. Thank you guys so much. Every 25, I give 5, and we are trying to get to 2,500 members this week, and we're currently at a little under 2,200. You guys are going to have to absolutely scramble if you're wanting that. Friday night, we were planning on not actually doing a stream. We were not going to be doing a stream on Friday night, but if you guys can hit the goal before Friday, we will do a community game night. It'll be a little bit later than usual because we'll be getting back from something. But yes, that is the current plan. So you guys are going to need about 250 members this week if you're going to try and do that. And then I'll be doing mine every 25 as well. Rich Rod says, I don't think Starfield can be saved. I mean, I think they have enough foundation to work with. I actually think they can put Starfield into a much better place. I do. I think it could be a turnaround story, but I do think it's Bethesda's Cyberpunk. I think it's like their, what right now, if you look at their history of games, it's the one that sort of stands the weakest with the community. It just doesn't have a good score. It didn't last or get any longevity with the PC audience, and I think it would probably have similar reception on PlayStation if it landed on PlayStation right now, but that doesn't mean that they can't put it into a much better place. I mean, they did that with Cyberpunk. I thought that Cyberpunk was just beyond saving for me. I thought, I'm never going to like Cyberpunk, and then Phantom Liberty turned things around for me. Cool Spoon says, I've been a longtime Elder Scrolls fan. Oblivion will always be my favorite, as I think Skyrim simplified things a bit too much. I like having to choose a class and star sign. Races also seemed more important in Oblivion. One of the biggest things for me will be the melee combat. It really seems like they haven't upgraded it in their games since Skyrim. I would love for the melee combat to be similar to Chivalry 2 or the Dying Light franchise. I also know they won't do it, but simple co-op would make these games so much more fun. Oh, I 100% agree with you. That was where, Elder Scrolls Online was essentially born out of the idea that, like, people wanted to play Skyrim together. I remember getting into Xbox party chats with my friend just so we could talk while we played through Skyrim, so it almost felt like we were playing together, even though that we were not. And then you're sharing secrets. You're like, oh, I found this thing. Oh, you got to go to this location, things like that. So, I don't disagree with that at all. I think co-op would be amazing to have in a game like this. If only Bethesda could use the Decima engine for Elder Scrolls 6. Right, the fact that they already have playable versions of Elder Scrolls 6 tells me that they will not be doing an engine switch, and I think that's fine. I get it. There's just way too much history at the company with the creation engine, way too much institutional knowledge, but the engine certainly started to show its wear and tear or its age with Starfield. Zubair says, I'm going to play devil's advocate today. Larian and Supergiant took advantage of early access, but they'd make a great game either way. Bethesda would mess up early access because they're so set in their ways. I mean, that's certainly an opinion that I can see why you might think that Larian still would have done a great job. But here's the thing. I'm not talking about doing a good job. My argument was that the level of freedom and the depth and the complexity, all of the various things that you're able to do in Baldur's Gate 3, that wouldn't be there without early access. It wouldn't. You can't test for that. You can't throw that into the mix to see, like, how is this even going to work if you don't have early access, if you don't have the community helping you, push against all those various systems. And from where I sit, I think Elder Scrolls 6, you're going to have to do more than just be like, yeah, it's another Skyrim. I think people would obviously be happy with another Skyrim, especially if you update the graphics and, improve things like what Cool Spoon's bringing up. I would love for the melee combat to feel better. I always preferred to play Skyrim in third person, which I know some of you think that that's like sacrilege, but like I prefer to see my player in my armor. And for melee-based combat, especially if I'm doing sword and board, if I'm doing sword and shield, I really do like seeing my character. And, the level of freedom that I would want to have in a game like this and the level of choice that would then impact my experience. I mean, that was one of the criticisms of Skyrim, was that, like, you actually didn't change anything. You had all of these choices, but they weren't as impactful as people wanted them to be, I always felt like they were impactful personally, but I remember seeing a lot of people criticizing Skyrim for that, and they were like, yeah, it just doesn't have these impactful choices. It doesn't really matter what you choose. You can kind of choose allegiance and to everybody, and it doesn't really change anything. I still thought it felt really, really cool. Yeah, there's a co-op mod for Skyrim on PC. Yes, that is true. I wish they would have been able to somehow bring that to console way back in the day when I was playing, Skyrim on my Xbox and, getting, like I said, getting into party chats with my friends just so we could talk like while we were playing. I remember Elder Scrolls Online being like almost like a dream come true when it first came out. I was like, oh my gosh, we can actually play this game, with other people. Starfield's better in third person. Yeah, I like the guns, though. I feel like some of the gun design is really good in Starfield, so I do like seeing the guns, Zephyroth says, you're right, Zubair. I could see Todd creating a game he thinks we need instead of getting with modern time on RPGs like systems. Right, like to say, Joker Quinn with the gifted member, thank you so much, taking us to 3 members on the day. I appreciate that. Guys, remember, every 25, I give 5 back, so keep it going. I don't know if they would be like stuck in their ways and they'd be like, yeah, we're not going to listen to the community. We're not going to make big changes, to the systems or receive the feedback. I think that'd be really odd to go into early access and to do that, to not leverage the feedback and what people are saying. Basically what Zubair said is like, well, Larian would have built a great game either way, right? Even if they wouldn't have done early access. And I don't necessarily disagree with you. I'm not necessarily saying like, well, Baldur's Gate 3 wouldn't have been good without early access. I'm talking about the level of excellence and the depth and the freedom that you got in Baldur's Gate 3 is only possible because of early access. Like, I don't think they would have got there. They knew how to make a Dragon's Dogma game, just like Bethesda knows how to make Elder Scrolls. I think maybe we're overstating how impactful early access in Baldur's Gate 3 was on the final product versus them literally needing it in order to fund the game. To say that they needed early access to fund the game doesn't take away from the impact that the players had on the game that they built. It's like, I get what you're saying. I don't think it's wrong to say, oh yes, early access was something that they largely needed to help fund the game. But you can't take away what it did, the impact that it had on the game's quality. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I think there's a lot to be said for early access having an impact on how much freedom there is in Baldur's Gate 3. How much creativity, or think about the level of innovation they were able to bring. Do you think they would have done that if they didn't have early access? Like, there are a lot of risks involved when you create that level of player freedom. There's a lot of risk. And I just don't know if studios are going to be able to take those risks when they're doing traditional development. AOZ with 20 months in a VIP. I feel early access and betas are one and the same, except that early access legitimizes making money for an incomplete product. It's fine for small studios because they need the money. But I don't think there's a problem with legitimizing making money for an incomplete product when you don't charge full price and the consumer knows what they're signing up for. How many times have we spent full price on a game that clearly wasn't complete? It happens all of the time. There's no repercussions unless you're on Steam. You're almost assuredly not going to get a refund on Jedi Survivor, or if people bought Rise of the Ronin and they agree with me that the performance is clearly a sign that the game wasn't ready to release. Dragon's Dogma 2 clearly wasn't ready for release, and we spend full price on games that aren't complete. For a developer to be transparent and to say, we think it's best for you to help us and to impact the game's development, so you can buy the game early, years early, right? 2 years before it's even going to come out, at a lower cost. And then the consumer can literally say, I don't want to buy an incomplete product. I'm going to wait for the full launch. At least that's truth in advertising. At least you know what you're buying. So let's just say Elder Scrolls 6 launched in early access in 2026. You can choose to completely avoid it. Why? You don't want to buy an incomplete product. Now, why were you able to make that choice? Because you were properly informed as a consumer that the version of the game that was in the public for purchase wasn't complete. So you were informed and made a decision to say, that's not a complete game, therefore I'm not going to buy it. And those that do buy it, they know what they're signing up for. But right now what we do is we wait 5 years for a game to come out. It comes out, it doesn't hit the expectations, it's not what we wanted, or it's not complete, or it's not ready. And we're like, yeah, well, I guess we'll just wait for patches. Two games just did it. A handful of games did it last year. Now, I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush and act like the entire games industry is doing this, but where's the harm in doing early access when so many big AAA games are basically launching and they're not ready anyway? That's why they should beta. But you and I both know, AOZ, betas are literally just help us stress test and find any last-minute bugs. Usually we play a beta like a month before the game comes out. Do you think they're going to make any foundational changes to the game in a month? Right? We all know what betas are. Betas are not betas. Betas are like, yeah, the game comes out in like a month, so we're trying to stress test the servers and, find any last-minute bugs. A $5 super chat tip from Alex. Baldur's Gate charged full price for early access. Worked out in the end, but caught some heat at the time. I thought they charged $50 for Baldur's Gate 3 early access. Am I incorrect in that? I thought they charged $50. You're telling me they charged $60? I mean, That's fair pushback, but people still know what they're buying. They still know they're buying early access. 9 times out of 10, when I look at an early access game in Steam, it's not full price. It's like 30 or 40 bucks. Now, you might say, oh, those are smaller games, those are smaller studios. But generally speaking, when you release a game in early access, you don't charge full price. You charge like 40 or 50 bucks. And what Cybersword is saying, Palworld, early access. Enshrouded, early access. Nightingale, early access. Now, Nightingale was in a much rougher spot, but Palworld and Enshrouded are doing great in early access. Valheim launched in early access, did it not? They charged 50, which could go on sale. Yeah, 50 is not full price. Full price games on Steam are commonly 60. And when a big $70 game hits PlayStation or Xbox and also hits PC, it's usually 60 in Steam. Yeah, 50 is not full price. Charging a high price does have the benefit of only letting it in the most committed. Few dabblers. Cannot figure out what is getting me. It's like a fuzz or something. It's like it keeps poking me in the eye. Even at 50, Valheim is still in early access. Oh, I thought they had their 1.0 release. I don't know why I thought that. In any case, you know what I'm saying? It's like I don't see the harm in saying this game is not. It's not. They're not even saying it's not ready. They're saying we would like to leverage the community to make this game better. I think we're being opposed to that to our peril. I think we're being opposed to that to our peril. There's nothing wrong with that. Why is that a problem? We sit around and we criticize developers for not getting it right, or for making dumb decisions, or, players don't like this and players don't want. Do you know what your expectations are for an open world RPG 5 years from now? Do you know? No, you don't. Because you might play a new game. You might play some, ambitious indie on Steam, or you might see trailers for a game and think, oh my gosh, that looks incredible. That's what I expect out of an open world RPG. And so your expectations are going to shift. And then, all of a sudden, you end up with a game coming out that was like, well, we thought this is what players were going to want, but now players are thinking differently about this. Why? Well, because we've been in development for 6 years. 6 years ago was 2018. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, the games you were playing then and the expectations you had then and the games we're now playing now, everybody's burned out on Fortnite. So any game that comes out that even smells like Fortnite gets a bunch of criticism, gets a bunch of hate. Well, 6 years ago, Fortnite was all the rage. Maybe I'm wrong then, but I don't recall having to pay anything extra on release. Right. Yeah. Thank you for the super chat, Alex. That's how early access works. If I buy an early access game right now on Steam and I play it, right, and I have a good time, and in a year and a half they release their 1.0 release, and maybe when they do that they decide to charge $60, they don't suddenly tell me I owe them $10. That's not how early access works. They're not like, hey man, you owe us $10 now. We're releasing the full game. I hope the next Elder Scrolls is good and can bring back the feeling I had playing Oblivion for the first time. I thought no game would bring back that feeling of wonder, but Elden Ring was able to do that. It's a cooperative effort. You want it to be good. We want it to be good. Let's make it good together. That's exactly right. I find it difficult to believe that they made some giant leap in game design on their 5th or 6th iteration in this genre, and that jump being so attributable to early access. Yeah, I think to ignore the benefit of early access is foolishness. I think we're being ideological. We're not being sensible. We're not being logical. It's not being driven by logic. It's being driven by an ideology. Oh, how dare you bring something to market before it's finished? That's an ideology. That's a belief. That's not factual. That's not logical. That's not based on evidence. That's just I think this is wrong. Well, okay. I mean, it didn't hurt Baldur's Gate 3. Didn't hurt Hades. It's not hurting Enshrouded right now. Are those games doing something that's wrong? having a game in early access? Is Palworld in the wrong? Like, we're opposed to something that we're seeing tangibly working in the market right now. And you want Bethesda to go nose down for 6 years, 5 or 6 years, with what will likely be their, I think, more important than Starfield is the next Elder Scrolls. It would be like suddenly getting Half-Life 3, right? It's what you want them to do that. Like, let's just trust in traditional development, because traditional development is so trustworthy right now. Right? It's so trustworthy. Some of the most ambitious games, some of the best stories of games right now are games that are turning it around, like No Man's Sky, which basically has treated itself like an early access game. If you think about it, it launched and it was like the bare bones of a game, and now 7 years later it's a completely different game. That right there proves the concept. It's like, well, if they would have basically said, no, we're not going to ship No Man's Sky until it's ready, we were, and they lean on traditional development, then I guess they would have turned around, tucked tail and run and spent another 4 or 5 years developing the game. People want them to do the exact same thing they did with Starfield so that they can hate it again. I only played Skyrim and a little Elder Scrolls Online. What mechanics did they dumb down? Oh, who's saying they dumb stuff down? Shooter Forever is saying they dumb stuff down. Yeah, what is he saying they dumb down, and in what game? I'm fine with devs that need funding doing early access. But I think there's so much more to be gained from early access than just funding. You know? We've said this many times. I remember the last time we said this, it was with Diablo 4. We all jumped into the Diablo 4 beta. Everybody had a largely pretty good time, and this happened with the Division 1. The beta, everybody's like, this is great, having such a great time. And then the game releases. And all the weak points, all the cracks, all the lack of polish, all the lack of forethought comes to light. It all comes to light. What the heck is wrong with this game? And we've always said this. How could the devs not know about this? How could they not know that their endgame was shaky or poorly designed? How could they know that player incentivization was going to break down in the third act or whatever the heck? Whatever the consensus is. And we've always said, you simply cannot internally test and learn what you're going to learn from the first 7 days of the public ripping through your game. You can't do it. You will never internally harness that much input. The people that find exploits and weak points. Like, we ran into this in New World, right? New World was basically playing exploit whack-a-mole for like a month, because like every other day it was like, well, there's a boar farm, well, there's this guy in this cave you can fight, all these exploits. Those are the types of things that you're never going to figure out, find, discover, or rectify without the public playing your game. This is where early access comes in and says, we're going to save you all that trouble. You launch one area, you launch the first act, you put the systems out there, and you let people press against the systems. King Sovereign with 18 months. I can see Bethesda putting a cornerstone franchise like Elder Scrolls 6 in early access. Oh, I can't see. And spoil surprises in the story and the experiences. No, it wouldn't be the full game. It's literally like that. You build like the first area. You build Act 1, essentially. You don't let people go all the way to the very, very end of the game. If it's so beneficial to the final product, if it's going to make their game so much more successful, then simply don't charge for it. Yeah, I don't think you could do that. I think you'd have to charge money. You'd have to have funding at that point to justify it. You couldn't be like, we're going to put our project out there in early access and engage with the community, and we're not going to charge any money. I don't think you could do that. I think that would set a really, really bad precedence and a really, really bad expectation of like, yeah, we're not even paying for this game. This game's free. Does Bethesda need funding? They do have Microsoft money to use. Right, but you have to have ROI. You can't just throw, millions of dollars at a project like the Elder Scrolls 6 and not be recouping that cost. Just because Microsoft has deep pockets doesn't mean that you can be like, yeah, we're not a profitable enterprise. Well, it doesn't matter. Microsoft owns us. That's not how business works. When big conglomerates like that own a bunch of companies, they want those companies and those projects to be profitable, Yo, thank you so much. Jacob Reed for the $5 super chat tip says, hey, Lono, I've been following you on Spotify. Got sick of missing the lies. What's the topic today? I think that Elder Scrolls 6 should launch in early access whenever they have at least a playable version of the game, for consumption by the public. The weakness is the same in any scenario. The strength of the studio. Look at Star Citizen in perpetual early access. Yeah, but that's a completely different scenario, and that's a completely different scenario because Star Citizen is so much more ambitious and so much bigger in scope than what Elder Scrolls 6 would likely be. These space sim, space travel, space exploration games, they're in another category. They really are. I don't think that's a fair comparison. I'll allow that MMO or hugely online games are different, and they need a ton of people to help them get running well. And see, Derek, you're getting at the heart of the issue. Games are now getting to the size of an MMO. They just don't have all of the people in there playing. Like the map size and the world size, the number of classes and NPCs and the quests and all the various things you're going to be able to do in the Elder Scrolls 6, it might as well be an MMO. There's no way that Elder Scrolls 6 is not going to launch and basically be that large. And when you make a game that big, you can't just be like, "Oh no, we've got this." Diablo 4 came out, and remember what I told you guys. Do you remember at the last minute when they were fiddling around with the Necromancer, and during the beta weekend, they overswung, and I told you they don't know what the frick they're doing. I said, this game is not ready for launch, and everybody told me I was being a hater. Everybody told me that I didn't know what I was talking about, and I said, this is an RPG. This is Blizzard. If they don't have these classes figured out right now, and they're overswinging on nerfs and buffs right before the finish line, right before the game comes out, this game is not ready for launch. There were people that were finding absolutely broken, busted builds before, in the first day or week the game came out. Do you guys remember that? And I said, these problems should have been deduced by the developer. And what did it take? It took a week. Not even. And these guys found these just insanely strong builds. And I remember people were telling me, they're like, well, when you have that many people playing, those types of things come to fruition. That's exactly what you can do with early access. If Diablo 4 would have launched in early access 2 or 3 years before it came out, a lot of those problems would have been rectified. Every game doesn't need early access. It's a specific type of game that needs it, one with massive complexity and too many permutations to test in-house. That's exactly right. Just to be clear, I don't think the next big single-player game needs to be early access. I think games that are quite naturally going to be massive in size, scope, and all of the permutations, like Zubair is saying, I don't think you can properly test for that internally. I don't think you can. Derek says, I meant that they need a ton of players to help evolve the game into what it will be. I don't mean that I'm okay with us paying the company to do their QA or playtesting for them. That's their job, not ours. Then you wouldn't buy an early access game. As the consumer, you would be informed, this game is not complete. I'm spending money to go play a game that's not complete. And you would say, I don't want to do that. And you would abstain. I would have spent money to play Diablo 4 in early access. I would have. And the net result would have been a better game. And then, so if you would have come, let's imagine a scenario where Diablo 4 would have launched in early access. Then you'd have willing consumers like me paying and be like, well, I'll spend 40 or 50 bucks to play an early version of Diablo. I just want to see what it's like, right? I don't have to provide feedback. I don't have to go to a forum. I don't have to fill out a bug report. I just play the game. And they gather the data on how I play and how everybody else plays, and they figure things out. Word on the street is they're seeing YouTube videos and Reddit posts and Twitter posts that this build is broken and this skill tree is boring and I didn't like this, and the reason I didn't do that is because that was lame and this was really fun and I want more of this, okay? And so they gather all that information. And they make changes to the game. And the game comes out 2 or 3 years later, full price, full launch, and now you buy it at full price. You got a better product. You're fighting against something that you could just ignore. And then it would give you a better game. With all due respect, some of y'all are being kind of stupid. Imagine that Elder Scrolls 6 release date is 2028. And imagine they did early access in 2026. You don't have to change anything that you were planning on doing. You don't. You just ignore it. You're like, I don't want to play an early access game. I don't want to beta test. Cool, man. You don't have to. Just wait for the official release date in 2028. In both universes, if early access exists, if early access doesn't exist, the game's coming out in 2028. What difference is it to you? You're going to get a better game. I won't buy the final game? Why would you? Why? Why? So let's imagine that Baldur's Gate 3 appealed to you, Eugene. You wouldn't buy Baldur's Gate 3 because it was in early access? That doesn't even make any sense. Plenty of people bought the launch version of Baldur's Gate 3. They bought it on PlayStation, maybe they bought it on Xbox, maybe they bought it on Steam. Every single person that bought the launch version of Baldur's Gate 3 got a better game because of early access. They weren't affected by early access. They didn't buy into early access. They didn't spend any time in an incomplete game, and they got a great Game of the Year winning product. I won't signal approval of early access by any megacorp. But why not? What difference does it make? If the game comes to market in the same amount of time, and you as the consumer, you don't have to change any of your behavior. The game is still going to come to market. Your problem with it is that players are willingly, knowingly, volitionally choosing to pay to play it early, to provide that feedback, to make the product better, and you're like, no, I have a problem with that. I told you why early access is fine for Baldur's Gate 3. Yes, and you slice that very cleanly. You're like, oh, well, they needed funding. Okay. Number one, we don't know if that's true. Have they said that? Number two, you're slicing that so cleanly and ignoring all of the benefits they got from early access that made the product better, more polished. Early access should easily be used as a form of transparency. Why would you be against it? It's like the people that aren't bothered by the microtransactions in Dragon's Dogma 2 but complain others don't like it. I don't think that's an equivalency at all. We all make decisions based on why or why we don't support products. Right. My understanding of your position is that if it's a big company, they don't need funding. Therefore, they have no right to do early access. Therefore, if they do early access, I will never support that game. That's your train of thought. I can never step foot on that train because I see all the benefits of early access. I see the benefits of telling the consumers, this product's not complete. This is early access. It's not full price. So the consumer knows what they're buying, as opposed to all the consumers who bought Jedi Survivor at full price and it wasn't a product ready for prime time, or everybody who bought Cyberpunk at full price, or Starfield at full price, or Forza Motorsport at full price, or Dragon's Dogma 2, or Rise of the Ronin. All of those games are prime examples of games sold at full price that were not ready. Early access makes it so crystal clear that that quite literally can't happen because you're knowingly buying the game at a lower cost and it isn't done, and then when it finally is done, you know that it's going to be a polished product. Everyone in the process is a willing participant. It's all transparent. That there is so much good in that, I can't see any bad in that. Jedi Survivor's coming to PS4. Good luck. I get triggered every time you bring up Survivor. Oh, I bet, man. Especially the people on PC. Good night. In the worst case, it finds rare bugs. In the best case, it creates amazing systems. My first thought was, no, delay the game 2 years instead of early access, but in reality, the problem is my FOMO, which we should learn to combat within ourselves. Two-part response. All right, hang on, Derek. Derek says, I mean, they need a ton of players to... Oh, hang on. Lono, you are laying out a perfect world where you would get exactly what you wanted. That $40 to do their work plus $80 for the finished game looks a lot different when your concerns go unheeded. I would not have to spend $80. That's not how early access works. I would spend $40, and that would mean I don't spend more money when the final product comes out. And no, I've not once said that I would get exactly what I wanted. Okay, so the premise of what you said is false. I would not be spending $120. That is not how early access works. If you buy a game right now in Steam, early access, for $30 or $40, and then a year from now they sell their 1.0 version for $60, you don't spend any money. You own the game. That's one of the perks of early access, okay? So the financial aspect of what you said is not true. The second part of what you said, I've not once said I'm going to get what I want. I've said you're going to get a better game. You are. To imagine a world where Elder Scrolls 6 launches in early access and we don't get a better product 4 years later, to act like that wouldn't happen, that doesn't mean I'm going to get my way. Oh, I think dual blades should be stronger as a mage. That doesn't mean I'm going to get my way. Like, if I provided that feedback in early access and I was like, I really like dual blade and I really like mage, and I really feel like the sacrifice of damage and armor when you turn into a mage hurts really the dual blade build, and they might ignore me. That doesn't mean I get my way. It just means I get a better product. I can't see it any other way. It's like, how could you not get a better product with that level of player feedback? This is a great discussion, by the way. If you guys are enjoying this discussion, do me a favor. Smash that like button. YouTube's been kind of weird. It's not putting me on people's home pages. A lot of the subs and normals and regulars that haven't been here, and they'll wander in and they'll be like, hey, what's going on? You're not on my homepage. The time change a week ago usually messes with it. So do me a favor. Smash that like button. Get us to 200 likes. We're trying to hit a big member goal for the week. We need about 250 members before Friday to do a big community game night. So give some members. Every 25, I give 5. Those are great ways to support the channel directly. If you want to talk in the chat, hit subscribe. Maybe I misheard you because earlier you said 40 for early access and then later buying the full game. No, I said that you could choose between those two things, Derek. You could choose between $40 for early access, or later you can just buy the full game. That's your choice as the consumer. You're not doing both. You choose one or the other. You know how to stop companies from releasing games that aren't ready? Stop buying them on launch. That's what you're saying, Eugene, is like, it's so doe-eyed, and you know it. Do you honestly think you're going to stop people from pre-ordering Elder Scrolls 6? Do you honestly think you're going to slow down the sales of Elder Scrolls 6 with saying this in a YouTube chat or on Twitter or wherever people say this? Stop pre-ordering games. You're wasting your breath. The average consumer is going to go, Elder Scrolls 6? Give me the big one, pre-order. I get a cool horse, give me the pre-order. You're never going to stop that. You aren't. We can dream of a day when people stop pre-ordering and they read the reviews meticulously and they wait and the lion's share of sales come after an embargo. We can all dream of that world. That world is never coming. So, work within the reality that we have. Early access creates the transparency that you want and the quality improvement of the game that you want. That's far better than the context that we're in with traditional development. I'm telling you, you have to adapt. And the adaptation of games this big is not waterfall development. Yeah, go nose down for 5 or 6 years. Hopefully player sentimentality doesn't shift over time, since it always is. And hopefully player expectations don't shift over time. And hopefully your game can really crystal ball it. No, launch an early access. Let people play the game. Let people have input. They need to stop complaining about games like that launching in that state. Well, sure, I think that's fair to say to people. If you continue to pre-order games and buy games before reading reviews and you keep getting bad games and then you're upset, yes. Yes. But the average consumer is not doing that. They're not plugged in. They don't know what embargoes are. Guys, can we take just half a second? I need everybody who's lurking, everybody who's listening, everybody who's watching, take a second, smash that like button. We've had a lot of oddities on the website. Double check that thumbs up. YouTube's being super strange. Typically when we have about 400 viewers, I'm like, hey, let's get some likes. I get more than 5. Like, something's going on. Double check and make sure it's not taking your likes away. I really think there's still an issue going on with that UI. Why do these companies keep doing things that I signal are okay? Right, but you can't change the economic reality of how executives and marketing budgets operate. You can't change that. These companies aren't going to change their ways because the general populace is going to respond to all of those things. They're going to respond to heavy marketing. They're going to respond to pre-order bonuses. They're going to. Do you know what I'm saying? They took our likes. Yeah, it always works when I do the second ask. I just think some people are, ignoring me. Derek says had to do it again. Okay, yeah, it was doing that to me the other day. I was watching an Asmongold video, and I was like, my like didn't save. I was like, I know that I hit the like button. I didn't really dig today for your stream. Normally right now on the homepage. I told you guys that was happening. I've said it so many times. Like, I know I'm not on the homepage. I know. I can tell when the starting numbers are low. I'm like, yep, YouTube's being funky. YouTube made some adjustments. They're trying to categorize videos that use AI. They've added a new checkbox for us. And anytime they add that to the filtering of videos, it's just going to mess with the platform. So they have a pretty serious issue on their hands. There's a lot of these AI channels that they're not real, and yeah, it's going to become a growing problem. So it's messing with categorization and organization on the platform. So whenever that happens, my content will just be harder to find until they fix it. So this is a great reason to follow on Twitter. This is a great reason to be in the Discord. It's a great reason to check your sub tab instead of your homepage. I'll always be on your sub tab. I'm Monday through Friday, very, very consistent. So YouTube's just being funky again. Aren't the success of Baldur's Gate 3 and Helldivers a signal, a powerful signal? What has that accomplished? I'm not sure what you mean, Zubair. Eugene says, I'm not aware if any other industry where they charge consumers to test their products. Wait, we find out that Lono's retired and this is AI Lono. Yeah, that's right. The YouTube app said the stream was up and coming. I clicked on it and it said you were already 10 minutes into the show. Yeah, there's been some issues with that too, like notifications going out late. I went live the other day and it like emails me when I go live. I got that email like 15 minutes late. I was like, what the heck? It's usually right away. So those are just issues that the platform's always going to experience. So you always want to ensure that you're in all of the places where you can get notified that I'm live, because YouTube's going to be inconsistent. It's just the nature of the beast. It's a very big platform. So I think it's totally a backwards relationship. Well, and I think you're being unidimensional because your position's against it, so you're not representing it in a holistic way. No one is doing early access and saying, I'm a beta tester. You're being unidimensional. Oh yeah, you're paying money to test the product. No. I'm paying money to provide feedback because I would like this game to land in a certain way. I would like them to handle certain systems in a certain way. I would like the loot table and the progression and the player incentivization. I want to have influence over that. Why on earth, for years, did we provide feedback about Destiny? Why? Because we wanted to have an impact on the quality of the game. And if you're going to say, oh, that's a live service game, that's different, the size and the scope of a game like Elder Scrolls 6, it basically has all those moving parts anyway. Massive loot tables, massive questing, tons of NPCs, tons of dialogue. Classes, skill trees, abilities, all spider web connected to each other. I'm not testing that. I'm not testing the servers. I'm providing feedback. This was good. I like this. This is not good. That's not testing. That's influencing. They're vastly different. Yo, good morning, feed. What game do you think will compare to the next Elder Scrolls? For years, Skyrim was the open world RPG standard. I think Elden Ring will be what new people compare it to. I mean, maybe. I think the difference with Elden Ring is that you don't have like NPC quest lines that are all interwoven. You don't have, you have classes to choose from, but not to the same degree that you do in Elder Scrolls. Like, there's very, very different. So I think open world exploratory, I think Elden Ring will be more often compared to like open world action RPGs, not necessarily like open world RPGs like Elder Scrolls, because Elder Scrolls just has a depth within the RPG of you've got your building your character aspect, the skill trees, your class is going to have certain propensities and weaknesses and strengths, and then you're going to be in the world itself interacting with NPCs, allegiances, factions. It's just very, very different. So I don't know if anybody's going to walk into the Elder Scrolls 6 and be like, this better be like Elden Ring. I don't necessarily think that that's going to be a major point of comparison. Again, if it's so valuable to them, they don't need the funding. They don't need to charge me either. So would your entire position change, Eugene, if Elder Scrolls 6 launched in early access for free? Harbinger comes in with a gifted member and takes us to 4 members on the day. Thank you so much. Would your entire position change if it was free? Yes, free is key. I don't care. I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I'll play the Elden Ring DLC. I've got a really good character that I want to get. I need to kind of brush up and boot the game back up and get good again. I've been loving Rise of the Ronin. I played a little bit more this morning. It's just so fun. Okay, yes. So the entire thing that you're hung up on is that if they charge, $40, I don't want to reward for crappy products. But that's such a reframe. That's such a reframing of it. Come on. When Baldur's Gate 3 launched in early access, would it be described as a crappy product? When Hades launched in early access, Palworld, Enshrouded, all these games launching in early access, are they crappy products? Or are they early versions of the product? Worst case scenario? Oh, I don't like legislating for worst case scenario because, listen, and here's why. Especially in this particular topic. Do you honestly think that the risk involved with early access, do you think they would heighten that risk by releasing a piece of crap? Like, think about the natural protection the consumer would have that, listen, man, early access is a pretty big risk. They're letting us see the product early. And if they release it and it's a piece of garbage, that's really going to slap them square in the eye. And even if that happens, the commitment is that we're going to be improving this over time. You bought an incomplete product. So you can come back to the game in 7 months and it could be a completely different game. And at least you knew what you were signing up for. You were signing up for early access. Studios with integrity are different. There are tons of companies that abuse early access. Sven says, you're buying into early access because you're betting on the game being good and you have faith that the game will be good. People shouldn't be buying early access simply to play early. Zubair says, I'm playing Shrouded right now. It's not crappy. It has bugs. It needs to be optimized. Some crap is not balanced. There will be changes. That's what I signed up for. Right. I agree with that. I think that's the key, is that you know what you're signing up for. When you know what you're signing up for, I think that's very different than what we've been dealing with. Sneaky Wolf says, there's a newer generation of gamers that will 100% compare Elden Ring to Elder Scrolls 6. I mean, I think that would be... if they do that, let's just say you're correct and people do that, they're like, there's a newer generation. It's like, you know, comparing Elden Ring and Elder Scrolls 6. I think they're going to be silly for doing that. I think within 20 minutes they would know they're being silly. Within 20 minutes they would know that that's a stupid thing to do. It would take you 20 minutes to be like, this is nothing like Elden Ring. Think about the 35 minutes that we're all going to spend creating our character. What do you want to be? Light elf? Dark elf? Wood elf? Dwarf? Do you want to be a Khajiit? Do you want to be a human? Do you want to be a Nort? Do you want to be this? Do you want to be that? Oh, after you do that, you're not done yet. Now you got to choose. There's probably going to be more than just the base level class. I would imagine there's class, and then there's like, you know, maybe expertise or something. And then you customize your character, and you make them look cool. And you're like, I want a dwarf with a beard that touches the ground, and I want a Khajiit that's tall and slender, or whatever the heck. And then you get into the game, hey, you're awake, and you're talking to NPCs, and you're getting quests. If somebody makes it through that introduction and is like, I'm still going to compare this to Elden Ring, I think that's a dumb person. I think we're talking about a gamer that's just dumb and it's not worth listening to them. If you go through all of that and you're like, yeah, I expect this to be like Elden Ring, you're dumb. Like, there's nothing else to say. There's nothing else to say. It's like you literally went through 45 minutes to an hour of 1,000 signals that this is not like Elden Ring. Like, on the surface, sure, if they look at trailers and they see an open world and they see a guy in armor and they see dragons, I could see somebody being like, oh man, that's going to be like Elden Ring. But after the first hour, if they're still making those comparisons, I just think they're a fool. They're like, you're just being a fool. The game is signaling to you at every turn that it is not like Elden Ring. I've got some feedback to my short. No, not with Bethesda's history of glitchy games. I hear that. I've had a lot of people say that. They're like, early access with Bethesda is basically the launch title anyway, the launch product anyway. I'm not buying a game and waiting 5 years for the finished product. I get it. This guy says neither. Bethesda should sell the rights of Elder Scrolls to ZeniMax and Fallout to Obsidian. Why? This guy says, I think every game should come with free early access. Like, we are testing your game for free so you can fix all the bugs and the game can release in a playable state. I don't see any cons to that. A win-win for sure. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. It seems like some people are agreeing with you guys. Some people are agreeing with you guys on my short that went out that, you know, they don't want to spend money for early access. Did you see the RE engine set a precedence for open world environments in that aesthetic? That of Dragon's Dogma 2, barring the necessity of incoming patches, there's a level of immersion. I can't decide whether or not Dragon's Dogma 2 looks good or bad. It just depends on the environments. Some of the combat looks phenomenal, and then other times I was watching a guy's stream, I was watching a guy's YouTube video, I was like, this game kind of looks like cheeks. It doesn't look that good. It feels super inconsistent, and I can't figure out why. Now, it could be depending on the person and their settings. Like, maybe I was watching a guy who turned all the textures down. Maybe he was running low res. I don't know. I can't get a clear beat on the quality of that game. Whenever I see the combat, I get incredibly excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, if they could get Dragon's Dogma 2 to run at 60 FPS on console, that game looks fantastic. And then other times I'm like, what's the matter with that game? Like, maybe it's the environments, maybe it's the lighting. Again, it could be people's settings on their PCs that are messing with, the gameplay that I'm seeing. So, I think Dragon's Dogma looks like a world-class game that is shrouded in microtransactions that are dumb and shouldn't be there, and they're not impactful, and they're not necessary. And it's also shrouded in, a bottleneck that makes it run pretty poor for a lot of people. So, It looks gorgeous when you crank the graphics. Yeah, I wonder if a lot of people are just like tanking their graphics to try to get frame rate because they don't realize that the bottleneck is the CPU. So you're only going to get so much of a bump from tanking your graphics because it's still going to hit the same bottleneck. Zubair says, anybody else here playing Enshrouded? I know we have a console-heavy crowd. I mean, I threw this question out on Twitter, and I got a lot of different responses. Now, some people were being comedic, right? They were like, well, you know, it's a Bethesda game, right? It's a Bethesda game, so they launch in early access anyway. Okay? Haha, that's funny. But here are some other responses that I got. Curious what you guys think about some of these responses. This guy says, probably, but they won't take feedback seriously, so it would be worthless. Now, this is what somebody else was saying earlier, like they wouldn't, I think it was Zubair that said this. The fear that they wouldn't take the feedback seriously. Right? Okay. I don't want to presume what they would do with the feedback. Being friends with the developers, they really don't want your guys' input on making games. They actually don't like force stuff from consumers. Well, they better figure it out for games of this size, man. You want player feedback. Somebody thought it was a trick question. Somebody said, well, maybe they could use it as a demo. You know, only play through a certain point. That's what early access... See, I wonder if that's the problem, that people hear early access and they think, here is all of Elder Scrolls 6 and it's in early access. That's not what it would be. It would be like the first area. It would be like the first act. And I wonder if we're having a misunderstanding. Like, are people seeing early access and that's their presumption? They're like, okay, you're going to give me the entire game and it's just going to be in like a super rough state? Like Baldur's Gate 3 launched, what was it? It was just like Act 1, wasn't it? You didn't have the full game. You would launch a portion of the game. I said that with Diablo 4. Like, you should have given people the first act and the skill trees, the loot tables. Don't even talk about the Paragon boards yet. You don't even need to do that. Figure out the skill trees first. Figure out the loot tables first. Baldur's Gate 3 Early Access was only Act 1 for 3 years. Brian says, why on earth do an early access program and then ignore the feedback? That sounds silly to proclaim that they would ignore. That's what I'm thinking. Like, if they got to a point where they decided this is the right choice for us, why would they then turn around and be like, yeah, but we're not going to take any of the feedback seriously. We know what we're doing. Okay. That sounds really foolish. That sounds exceptionally foolish to do. To basically admit that you want feedback from people, but then not take the feedback. Baldur's Gate 3 didn't have the full Act 1 either, so it wasn't even the full Act 1. Eugene says, I cannot accept that in cases where the companies don't need the funding. I'm curious, Eugene, if it was free, would you play? Or would you just wait for 1.0? Like Elder Scrolls 6, let's say they do early access and it's totally free. Would you play? Would you try it out? Or would you say, yeah, I don't want to beta test. I'll wait for the full price game. Would it be enough to then earn your patronage when it launches, but you still wouldn't? You're like, nah, I'm not going to engage in a beta. Can we get call-ins so I can call in and yell at Eugene? No. Zubair says, I can imagine a reality where some executive who doesn't understand early access and just forces it on people. I mean, Eugene said this yesterday during the member stream. He said, executives are not going to let them do this. The product, the IP and the franchise is too big. It's worth too much money. There's no way they let them do this. And I kind of agree with that. I actually don't think there's a good chance that they would ever do this. I think if I was a betting man, I'd put my chips on the table and I would say they're not. There's no way Bethesda, but there's no way Bethesda does this. They're not going to launch Elder Scrolls 6 in early access. They're not going to. I think they're going to do traditional development. I think they're going to basically take everything they did in Skyrim and try to, like, you know, replicate and expand. And I think that'll be enough for most people. You know, I think a new Skyrim with, you know, a whole new, you know, set of weapons and skills and classes and this big giant world and quests and NPCs. I think that'll be enough for most. Seriously. That's what people will, you know, have been wanting and waiting for. They're not going to worry about, well, it needs to be super innovative and they need to do new things. Why would you want that to be free when you don't have to buy it? You can let people that want to give feedback do it and just wait for the full game. Well, for sure, Hasio. Like, I'm okay with spending money to get early access because I know what I'm buying. I do. I know that when I spent money to play, you know, did I spend money to play Witchfire? I can't remember if that cost money or not. I can't remember. If I would have spent money to play Baldur's Gate 3 in early access, it wouldn't have bothered me at all. I would have been like, I know what I'm signing up for. If I would have spent money to play Diablo 4 in early access, I would have been okay with that. I'm like, I know what I'm signing up for. 40 or 50 bucks to play the game 2 or 3 years early. Dubear says, I think you need to sell it to gatekeep. I tend to agree with that. I think you'd actually want to have a price ticket on it so that you do get your, you know, your more invested consumers and not just people that are like playing for free. You'd get a lot of bad data. Like, oh yeah, look how many people played the game for 5 minutes and just stopped. Yo, Wild Mustang says, I did it. Congrats on the gold badge, dude. Finally, after all this time, there it is. Would they need early access if they still paid testers? Well, here's the thing with early access. Early access provides you with infinitely more info, data, and feedback than you're ever going to get from internal testers. Over the course of a week, you could have, I don't know, 1 million people have played your game. You are never going to get that much internally, ever. Looky-loos, as Lono may say. Well, a looky-loo is when they get you to look one way and then something's happening in the other direction. That's what a looky-loo is, isn't it? Pricing changes the entire equation, says Eugene. It becomes a true test environment / relationship, in my opinion. Yo, it's good, Marcus. So, yeah, in your mind, Eugene, it should be almost like a public testing environment or like a public testing server where you have zero concern about the fact that, like, you're paying money for an incomplete game or something like that. You're like, nope, this is a public testing thing. This is something that the public is able to do. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that changing, you know, your mind. I would be really curious. I think the thing that I'd be the most curious about would be whether or not the community at large would embrace it. Right? Could you get general consumer acceptance of this? Because I don't necessarily know. I don't necessarily know if the average consumer is as informed or convictionally driven as we are. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you opened up your PlayStation and you scrolled over to the Elder Scrolls 6 game and you saw, oh, Elder Scrolls 6 early access, $40. I think the average consumer would be like, cool. Sweet, man. You know, little brief blurb. This is intended to be an early access version of the game to, acquire feedback for the full launch, in a few years or whatever, I think the average consumer are like, this is kind of dope. Now, there would be consumers that are like, I'm not doing that. I'm not early access. What the heck is that? They might even look at the price tag and say that. They'd be like, that's not a complete game. I don't know. I'm not paying money for a beta, right? There would be people that would say that, but I just wonder if, like, the consumers at large would be thinking differently. They would be saying, hey, a game is a game. At least I know what I'm buying. Yo, what's good, Ginger? Did I say what's good, Ginger? Am I in a time loop? Ginger says, I'm pro early access for games, but then I like early access for games. I think early access has certainly gotten a bad rap because of some of the games that just never leave early access. So I do think there is a potential stigma, but I think games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Hades and Enshrouded and Pow World can certainly paint a different picture. I don't think early access should be on console, says Zubair. Pow World is an anomaly. It's part of the PC Steam culture. Console players just want it to work. PC boys are okay with tinkering. You didn't, but what's good? I do that sometimes. Like, I see somebody in chat and I make the mental notes to give them a greeting, and then I think that I've greeted them. So then when I go to greet them, I'm questioning, wait, have I already done this? Like, it's like a self-inflicted form of deja vu. Free early access, says AOZ. Let consumers donate to the studio if they want to give money. I don't want to legitimize making money on unfinished products. Devs can exploit this. Sadly, I think that's a valid concern. Yeah. I think that's a valid concern, AOZ. Because there would certainly be devs that launch in early access, make a ton of money from, imagine a game like The Day Before. Maybe not quite that extreme, okay? But imagine a game sort of in that hemisphere of super rough around the edges, super overhyped, literally like a slap together nothing. Right? They could sell early access, and then a year or two later, they're like, thanks for all the money, suckers. We've decided to not pursue this game any longer. Rachel says, you mean everyone gets a greeting, not just me? Yes. You're special in other ways. They already make money on unfinished products. Right? That's what I've been saying, Reckless. That's what I've been saying. They already sell games that aren't finished. At least this time we would know. Aseo says, if it goes free, how much of that response would help a game in that genre, and how much of the feedback would they have to read or look if it doesn't fit into the genre? That's why I agreed with Zubair when he was like, you've got to gatekeep it with money. You've got to gatekeep it. You can't let people play for free because you're going to get a lot of bad data. You're going to get better, more focused data if you have to spend $30 or $40 to get in. You're way less likely to get people that are like, well, I've never really played a game like this, but I'm going to check it out. Like, that's just not helpful data. We saw that with Lies of P. Lies of P got its lowest score on Xbox. Why? Because Xbox players are bad. No, because it was on Game Pass. So that means a huge number of people that downloaded the game and left a review on Xbox were probably like, I never really play games like this. Let me check this out. That's a great value to the consumer, but you get a lot of bad data as the developer. It's like, man, the guys on Xbox don't really like our game. No, that's not true. Game Pass just opened up the funnel to let people in who don't ordinarily play games like that. If you don't ordinarily play a Souls and you jump into Lies of P, you're going to go through that first area and that sheriff's going to whoop the tar out of you. You're going to be back on the train and you're going to say, F this, I'm out. Like, there are tons of people that probably have that experience. I've played a lot of Souls-likes, and every time it happens, there's that twinge of like, ooh. do all this again, like, and if you're not accustomed to that. So early access on a game like Elder Scrolls 6, I don't know if Elder Scrolls 6 is so specific as a genre that you would really get bad data. I think you'd probably get pretty good data, but your data would probably be better, of a higher caliber. It would be more focused if you did have to spend money to get into the early access. I think you're going to get different levels. I can't talk. You're going to get different levels of bad data depending on the game. If you let everybody try out your Souls-like game, you're going to get a lot of people that are like, it's too hard. And that's just not helpful because they're not accustomed to games like that. So they're not giving you good feedback. Okay. That's not valuable feedback. You know that people that don't play Souls games are going to think your game is too hard. Like, thank you for telling me that the color red is red. Like, okay, go away now. So I do think that depending on the game, you'd be more likely to get bad data in certain genres. I don't know if Elder Scrolls 6 would be one of those. I think the average person would sort of know what they're signing up for. Like, oh, it's an open world RPG. Now, if it's super complex and there's a lot of decision making that you got to do in the first hour, you might turn off, the casual Andes out there that are just like, dude, I just want to swing my sword. I don't want to tell you, I don't want to pick a race and a class and a subclass and a backstory and a region. I got to pick between 7 dialects, and this dialect I'm going to get hated in this region, and this dialect I'm going to get loved in this region. Like, I made that up. I don't know if they're going to do that, but like that level of decision making might turn people off. If you're getting a massive failure rate, but it's all casuals, is your failure rate high or not? What needs balancing? Right. Like, they, what did they change? Shoot, there was a game recently where, it wasn't Biome 3 in Returnal. What was the game recently where they found that something... Oh, it was a boss. It was something in a game where... They did this recently, and they lowered the difficulty of the boss, and it was a Souls... I swear it was a Souls game. Was it Lies of P? Was it that where they, like, there was a boss that everybody was... We presumed that the fail rate was too high? What game did that recently? They made changes to a boss, and people were, like, really upset and really angry, and it was like, well... They have a fail rate number that they think's acceptable. Armored Core, yes, thank you. It was Armored Core. There was a boss that what's his name? He had such a cool name, and he shot all the missiles, right? And he had like the circular thing around him. It was that guy, and everybody got really upset. And I remember telling people. Yeah, I remember they did it to Radon or what's his name? His hitboxes were too big. Like, he would swing and miss you and still get you. Yeah, Baltius. Yeah, it was Baltius in Armored Core. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, Eugene's upset. The people that beat him are upset. But the developer, and this is where FromSoft guys have got to respect the art, okay? If you're going to sit here and you're going to defend the lack of an easy mode and you're going to say, the artist's intention has to be respected, well, that goes both ways, champ. If they've determined that the fail rate is too high on a boss and they're like, this is not what we were intending, we did not intend this boss to be this difficult, he's exceeding what we aimed at, we're going to tone him down a little bit. Goes both ways. You got to respect the intention of the artist. We all do this, right? We defend FromSoft, we defend Souls-likes, we say, hey, the lack of an easy mode, it's part of the artist's vision, it's part of the full package and the full spectrum of the canvas of the picture that they painted. You got to respect it when they decide that something's a little bit too hard. They're like, yeah, the fail rate here is not what we expected. This isn't lining up properly. And that might be easy to do. Because internally... they're very comfortable with a game like that. They were probably walking all over Baltius. Because he's going to do this, he's going to do this, he's going to do that, he's going to do this. And then the average player's like, I don't know what's going on, I'm dead. Guys, if you're just tuning in, we've been discussing Elder Scrolls 6 and why I think they should launch the game in early access. Do me a favor. If you haven't done so already, press that like button and do a double check. We had to do this earlier. I was like, hey, guys, let's get some likes, and we didn't really get any. Make sure it's registering your like. Like, just do a quick double check. Make sure it's saving it. We could easily hit 300 likes right now. There's plenty of people here. We are going to be covering the Kill the Justice League Season 1 showcase. We're going to go to that in about an hour and a half. So we're going to keep discussing this as well as other topics. And appreciate you guys being here. The Marvel Rivals game is a 6v6 team-based PvP hero shooter NetEase game. Free to play. Beta coming in May. Steam in the Epic Store. Wait, so it's not mobile? I heard it was going to be PC and Apple and Android. There's no mobile version of the game? Another PvP hero shooter, guys. We don't have enough of those. We need more of those. Zubair says, I don't have to respect crap. I'll pick and choose how I want to win my arguments. That's right. That's right. Every Bethesda game launches in early access. It's called release day. I know people made that joke on Twitter. I get it. I get why people are saying that. I think that's obviously you're being, hyperbolic to make a joke. So Marvel Rivals has been revealed, a new superhero team-based PvP shooter. Let me make sure my browser's muted. It literally I hate to be that guy, but it literally just looks like Overwatch in third person. Which, it might have a chance. Overwatch is certainly in a bad spot with the public. Rivals with no release date. Closed alpha begins May. It's not releasing in May. Closed alpha releases in May. Steam in the Epic Store. I'm going to tell you right now. That game has a shot. It actually has a shot because it looks an awful lot like Overwatch. And the Overwatch community is basically looking for a home right now. Starfield got good engagement with early access. I'm not talking about like 72 hours or a week of early access, Alpha Wolf. I'm talking about like you launch in early access in 2026 and you don't release the full version of the game for 2 years. The full release of Elden Ring, the full release of Elder Scrolls 6 would be 2028. But you would drop the game in early access in 2026. Now, when I say early access, I also mean it's not the entire game, but, in early access. Like, you would just release, like, the opening area, but you'd have your skill trees built out, loot tables. You'd continue to kind of add things and update things and let people test things out. Yeah, Marathon's doing Heroes as well, according to the leaks. Yeah. This is true. Are you going to cover the Apple lawsuit? I'm not really in the mood to cover lawsuits, to be quite honest. It's tiring having to look at PDFs. I'd rather talk about games. For real, though, I think early access would be a mistake. One, they don't need to draw attention. Two, I don't think an incomplete Elder Scrolls world is a good thing for players. I mean, I readily admit that there are challenges. I readily admit that there are risks involved with doing early access. Definitely. But I think the risks are worth it. If you want to build a truly big, open world, complex RPG with all these systems, I think it's worth it. I think you're going to benefit greatly. I think Diablo 4 would have benefited immensely from this. Here's why I don't think they're going to do it. I can sit here and I think I can make a very good case. I think I can make a pretty compelling argument as to why they should do it. I don't think they're going to. I don't think Diablo would have ever even considered it. Why? The hubris of a big developer, the hubris of an established IP that everybody knows about. We're gonna launch Diablo in early access. We're Diablo after all. You certainly are. We're not going to launch Elder Scrolls 6 in early access. We're Bethesda. Well, this is Elder Scrolls after all. Okay. You better nail it. You better nail it. Let's hear it. I mean, I've been arguing for the past hour and a half. I'll give you a quick run over of it. I believe that traditional development cannot account for the size and the scope of a game like this landing on player expectations. I think that it takes far too long for what I call a miscalculation or a mistake. You don't know it's a miscalculation. You don't know it's a mistake until it's too late. I gave an analogy of I was reading a book and the guy was talking about how slight trajectory adjustments can lead to bad things, right? And he made the point by saying, you know, he was helping this guy fly like a tiny little plane in Africa. They were like delivering medical supplies, and sometimes the pilot would let him drive. And if he was off on their heading by even like a degree, like a small amount, he'd get very stern with him. And he said, you have to understand that if we're off by just a teeny bit, we're going to end up in the wrong place. And I use that analogy to say that when you start building a game right now, and it's not coming to market for 5 years, you're going to make foundational decisions about the skill trees, the passive skills, the active skills, the loot table, enemy health, enemy damage, the world, all these things. You're making all these foundational decisions, and you don't know if any of those things are mistakes or misfires or bad ideas. You don't know until it's too late. Let's do this with the skill trees, says Diablo 4, and then it sets this trajectory, and you end up all the way over here. And then the game comes out and people are like, we don't like this up here. Well, you can't just click undo. You can't just be like, oh, let's just rewind the clock and go all the way back down to these foundational choices that we made, and we'll just fix it. Nope. It's a spider web of choice. It touches everything. The way they built the skill trees in Diablo, it touches the loot table, it interacts with the Paragon boards, it interacts with the end game, it interacts with passives and actives and abilities, it interacts with resistance. All these things are tied to it, and you can't just be like, well, let's just change it. No, you make changes now, it's like too late. It's like saying you missed a turn and you're a semi-truck. You can't just bust a U-turn and turn around. The vehicle's too big for that. The agility's gone at that point. There's no agility left. You know, it's not a go-kart that can like quickly turn around. It's an aircraft carrier. This game's built. Now we can start to slowly overhaul and make changes, but good golly, it's going to take forever. They're completely overhauling itemization. Right. And is that necessary if 3 years ago you could play Diablo 4 and provide feedback on itemization and the skill trees and the abilities and even the Paragon boards could have eventually been added, right? You give people a taste of the end game. You don't give them the entire game, but you give them a taste. You let them see, maybe even have 2 different versions where you can like load into the end game or load into the early game. I don't know. You're assuming the devs will listen to feedback. Some do and some don't. Okay, so if some do and some don't, does that mean we should or shouldn't do early access? I would prefer Bethesda trust in themselves and react to the market and trying to mimic it. I'm not saying they should mimic the market and trend chase. I think trend chasing is a mistake. We have a video hitting our other channel about X-Defiant trend chasing. We see trend chasing in Kill the Justice League, which I'm sure we'll talk about that later today when we co-stream their showcase. I think trend chasing is not what I'm after here. What I'm after is if 1 million people log in and play your game and say, yo, we want more of this. This over here is great. But this thing you're doing over here, this sucks. That feedback is sparing you from having the plane set to the wrong heading. And you end up in the wrong place. And there's no going back. It's too late. I don't think Diablo 4 would be out right now if 2 years ago it was in early access. And you know what, Eugene? I'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with that. If Diablo 4 would have gone into early access 2 years ago and we were facing a launch date, you know, maybe later this year or next year, I'd be totally okay with that. If we got a better game and the foundation was built to last and their aspirations for live service and X number of years of support and added content was building on a better foundation, that'd be far superior to what the frick they launched. One of the biggest developers and one of the biggest pieces of property in the world. Just embarrassing. Embarrassing. And early access would have helped significantly. Like, look at all of the things they had to change. I mean, just, it was like the first, month? They had to make foundational changes and uproot things, or at least admit that things weren't good. Would you be okay with paying full price or more 2 years ago and not having a full product since? I don't know why you're saying full price, because the entire premise of early access is that you don't pay full price. And to Reckless Gambit's point, we already did that. We already did pay full price for a game that wasn't ready or wasn't thoughtful or didn't land on player expectations. We already did. 2 years ago, you're comparing 2 years ago, I could have spent $40 or $50 to get an early access version of Diablo that would have resulted in a better version of Diablo, I don't know, a year from now. I paid full price for a game, and I'm not touching it, and it's boring. Look at what I did with Jedi Survivor. I bought Jedi Survivor at full price. I didn't play it for 8 months. I'm not saying Jedi Survivor is a good game for early access. What I'm saying is we already do pay full price for games, and we don't get the complete package. Blizzard would lock that crap behind deluxe versions. I mean, to be fair, yeah. I mean, Blizzard probably wouldn't handle early access in the most, player forward way. I could probably agree with that. Why are you presuming Blizzard would give you early access at a discount? Which is better, an early access where you get to choose if you want early access, or early access where everyone gets opted in without a choice? That's exactly right. That's exactly right. At least I know, Eugene. At least I know I'm buying Diablo 4 at full price, and it's not done. It's early access. They're estimating 2 to 3 years before full launch. At least I know what I'm signing up for, instead of what we all signed up for, which was, hey, that beta was pretty fun. Full game comes out. What the frick is this? Well, I guess they can fix it in a couple of years. I didn't know that's what I was buying. Now, obviously, I tried to draw attention to the fact that Diablo wasn't ready. You know what I'm saying? I tried to draw attention to the fact. I tried to tell people. I was like, this doesn't pass the smell test. It doesn't pass the smell test. It doesn't. This game isn't ready. I got attacked pretty regularly for that viewpoint. My videos and my uploads did not land well with that community. They did not like what I was saying. Well, who ended up being right? You can flock to the big guys, and they all said it. You can cheer in the comment section of Darth microtransactions and Asmongold. They all said it. Well, but sure, now everybody's saying it, that the game wasn't ready or the game was in a terrible spot. Now, I don't know where the game is now. Frankly, I don't care. Like, why would I wander back over to that game? There's so many games out right now, begging for my time. Ain't no reason to go back now. You would need to have a complete turnaround. If Elder Scrolls 6 launches at 30 FPS only, are you getting it? No. I don't have any interest in 30 FPS games. No. If a game launched and it was only in 720p resolution, I don't think I'd play that either. Like, you know, here's old gen performance. Okay. No thanks. Listen, with all due respect, if your game comes out at 30 FPS, forget your game, dude. Forget your game. There's an ocean of games for me to play right now. I don't have time for all the games that I would like to play. And you think you're going to walk out into the landscape and be like, yeah, man, 30 FPS. We think that's fair. Oh, that's fine. I'm not going to play. Now, does that affect the commercial success of really big titles? Not really. No. Dragon's Dogma seems to have done just fine. It's a big name title. It's Capcom. It was highly anticipated. You know, a lot of people still play in quality mode, so they're probably not noticing the 30 FPS. So I don't think it's hurting the commercial success of like really big games. But they certainly are worried about the PR surrounding 30 FPS. It's why they keep it a secret until the very last minute. Gotham Knights tried to hide it. They tried to suppress it. We got an apology for it with Redfall. And then Dragon's Dogma, they let rumors about 30 FPS run wild for like a month and a half. And then they finally did an interview like the week before the game came out and confirmed it would be 30. And then the previews came out and it was like, yes, it's 30. If 30 FPS wasn't a problem, then they wouldn't keep it a secret, would they? Right? How many pre-orders did they procure with all their trailers and all their marketing, and nobody had a clue that they were buying a game with old gen performance? Nobody knew. Who would have thought? I remember when the rumors started surfacing, I was like, that sounds kind of crazy. I thought 30 FPS is the future. It's not the future. No. It would be like picking players for your dodgeball team, all right? And there's 10 people standing there, okay? And there's one guy who insists on playing dodgeball with a blindfold on. That's just his vibe. That's just what he does. And he's terrible. And he always gets out. Okay? I got 9 other people to choose from that aren't like that. So when your game derpily walks into the market, it's like 30 FPS, yuck. I'm like, yeah, I got 9 other games I can play that aren't giving me old gen performance. Thanks so much. I'll see you. I'll see you in the postseason if you decide to update and join the 21st century. That's my attitude. Like, you chose this. You know, you're choosing to put the blindfold on and play dodgeball. I'm not picking you for my team. I got 9 people to choose from. I ain't picking you. You're going to get out right away every time. I got 10 games to choose from. And your game thinks 30 FPS is fine? Cool. I'm not buying your game. It's that simple. That's just Larry. It's just the way he likes to play. He's a good guy. Dragon's Dogma 2 is a fun, beautiful adventure game you're missing out on. Oh, I certainly know that I'm missing out on a good game, but I'm not going to pay for and play 30 FPS games. I'm just not going to do it. It looks awful. I stopped playing 2 games that I was enjoying because of this. I stopped playing Tears of the Kingdom, and I stopped playing Final Fantasy 16. Because it looks terrible when you're not getting the 60. It looks awful. Whenever I went into town and whenever I went to explore in Final Fantasy 16, it looks awful. Tears of the Kingdom doesn't even hold 30 at certain points. Like, I thought I'd be able to tolerate it. I was like, well, if it's only raining, it's every once in a while, it's not that big of a deal. Nope, I was wrong. It was bad. I couldn't do it. If I put down 2 games that I really liked, do you think I'm going to buy your game brand new at 30? No. I can't be missing something that doesn't meet my basic standards. Right, but Eugene, think of it this way. If right now somebody clicked their fingers and all of a sudden Dragon's Dogma 2 was a locked 60 on console, oh my gosh, you know that we would be playing it because we know it's a good game. You can see the fun that people are having, the freedom, the creativity, the combat, the world. It's clearly a great game. It really is. The story, though, I know. Don't think that I'm not keenly aware of the fact that that game looks great. But when I have a backlog of games that are giving me the minimum performance expectations that I had this gen, and that game isn't, it's going to get passed on. It's that simple. It's a very simple equation for me. You would have to be in the driest of droughts for me to like storm into a 30 FPS game. By the way, if you guys are enjoying the show, we're getting a little uptick in the viewership, man. Thanks so much for being here. Make sure and hit that like button. Get us to 300 likes. Also, we are working on a member goal today. Every 25 members, if you guys gift, or if you joined brand new, it gets added to the total. You don't have to wait for gifted memberships. You don't have to rely on gifted memberships. But when we hit 25 new members, I gift 5 members as a way of saying thank you. So you guys can help us hit that goal, and we are pushing for a pretty big goal for Friday night. As it's paced right now, there will probably not be a stream on Friday night. We were already planning on not doing one because we're going to be coming back from something. But I said, hey, if you guys get us to 2,500 members, I'll do it. As it stands right now, that's just probably not going to happen. So that community game night has already taken place. We did it earlier in the month. I was going to give you a second one. Who knows? Stranger things have happened, but at the current pace, it's not happening. So don't plan on that unless you guys go crazy today and tomorrow and Friday, which, you guys have done that before, so we'll see. But for now, the plan also is in about an hour, we will be switching to a new stream. We will be streaming the Kill the Justice League Season 1 showcase. But right now, we're kind of continuing the discussion about whether or not the Elder Scrolls should launch in early access. And the summary of the debate has essentially been there are people who are sort of opposed to early access on principle. They just don't like it. If you go up from those people, there are people that are opposed to it if you charge money and you're a really big developer who doesn't need the funding, right? Like early access for smaller studios, early access for smaller devs and companies, that's helping them get funding. But if you're like a really big company like Bethesda, there are people that are in chat that are like, no way, dude, they don't need the funding, they don't need to do early access, or they don't need to charge for early access. My contention is that early access would be extremely helpful to a game like Elder Scrolls 6. It would have been helpful to Diablo 4. I'm okay with them monetizing it because I do think that would limit the funnel of players that you get your feedback from, leading to, I think, better, more focused feedback. If you just made it free, I worry that you would get feedback from people that aren't really interested in the game, that would just boot up, play for a little bit, and then walk away, and you wouldn't really necessarily know how to interpret that data point of people who leave so quickly. Their ego's too big for that. They think they know better than you. You're asking a company who made their fans write essays to get unbanned? What are you referring to, Nick? I'm not familiar with that. Capcom needs to read the room. We want fun exploration and combat. We don't need every NPC to have so much dynamic behavior. And see, that's another thing where, thank you so much, Abe. Abe gifts a member and puts us at 5 out of 25. Some of the big boys sort of wait in the wings, and sometimes they see those opportunities for a 20 bomb and they take them. You might be tempting them. We'll see. If not, Abe says single gifted train, choo choo. So we'll see if you guys can beat some of those big guys have been here, so you better watch out. We'll see if you guys can get a single member train before somebody drops a 20 bomb. We'll see. We've gotten some 20 bombs. Last week we got a couple 50 bombs. Absolute bonkers. So, you guys could push it. I believe in miracles. Oh, Bethesda customer service team is famously absolutely horrible. Okay. These 30 frames might push more to PC, the best place to play your games. I mean, it's the best place to play your games if that's your preference. It's not necessarily the best place to play your games if your preference is, simplicity, playing on a couch, if you don't like messing with mouse and keyboard, which I guess you don't have to. You just plug a controller in. But a lot of people just prefer the simplicity of a console. Lono must have turned on low latency mode. No, I'm on normal latency. YouTube keeps encouraging me to run ultra low latency, but I know that adds buffering for you guys, so that's why I don't do it. Harbinger with a gifted member. Thank you so much for taking us to 6 members on the day. I could see them responding to early access criticism with maybe you need a new PC. Well, early access criticism wouldn't necessarily need to center around, is the game optimized well or not? Patrick gifts a member, keeping the single train alive. Abe did this yesterday. The current record for a single gifted train was yesterday. I believe it was 9. Was it 9? I've been in early access for 36 months, says Zubair. Thank you for 37 months of membership, Zuby. Yeah, the current record for a single gifted train yesterday, I believe, was 9. You guys could try to beat that. Currently, you have 3. We'll see. I'm having a lot of fun with my second playthrough of Lords of the Fallen right now. It's keeping me from buying Dragon's Dogma. Same with performance. I know I can run Lords at 4K 60. Dragon's Dogma 2 will give me a shock. Didn't they do some good updates too recently to Dragon's Dogma, like updated some systems and stuff? There goes Zinthos. Zinthos is going to add to the single train. Here we go. Taking us to 8 on the day. Now you guys are at, what's the count? It's Abe's 1, 2, 3. That's 4. That's 4. Yeah, we had 4 members when you guys started it. That's how we'll do the math. Okay, 4 members when you started it. Early access games should not be expected to be optimized or balanced. That's what early access is for. If you want those things, wait for 1.0. That's right. Zubair is going to throw in and take the single train to 9 on the day. I'm sorry, not to 9, but to 5. 9 total. Just give me Hades 2 and Hollow Knight Silksong. Right. Yes. I wish I would have gotten more into the first Hades. I've kind of come a long way with Rogues. I wish I would have given that game a little bit more time, because I know it's good. Bethesda sent out bans to players that were trying to make Fallout 76 more enjoyable by modding the game. Bethesda will undo the ban if the player writes them an essay apologizing. What kind of private school detention nonsense is that? Like, what the heck? If you write an essay apologizing, you can get back into the game. Yo, what's good, Sadiq? You said earlier you wanted a greeting. I'm sorry I didn't give you one. Good to see you, Sadiq, with flowers. Gifting a member and taking the member train to 6. The current record, yesterday was 9, and you guys are currently sitting on a 6-member train. 6 single gifted member train. Hades is still out there. Best balanced game I've ever played. Yeah, my backlog is crazy. I'm just loving Rise of the Ronin right now, I played last night. I played some this morning. It's just great. I'm absolutely loving it. The combat it's something special. It really is. I love it. If you like Sekiro and Ghost of Tsushima, this is like their love child. It's fantastic. Not to mention they're the same team who were responding to the bad Starfield reviews. Thank you, Lono. I feel special now. You should feel special, Sadiqua. How are we feeling about paid access to Joker for the main Suicide Squad story campaign? I'm not sure what you're asking me. Isn't that how it's always been, that you pay to access the new character? Because I'm sorry. No, it's supposed to be free. Wait, what? How are you feeling about paid access to Joker for the main Suicide Squad story campaign? They said all post content is free. What are you paying for? It's going to be great in 6 months. The funny part is that some folks think that the PS5 Pro will fix games that are 30, but it likely won't. What games are you talking about that are at 30? Stone Spire takes a single train and picks it up and takes us to 11 members on the day. And Insomniac Black takes us to 12 members on the day. There it is. 8 single gifted train. Keep it going. Sudoku Sadiqua. Yeah, Joker's free. All post-launch content is free. He's free if you beat the game, but you can pay for him as an alternative. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. If you'd like to buy him, you can. You can buy him if you just bought the game. Yeah, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. That's completely optional. Optional purchases are not a problem. He's free. Just play the game. You don't want to play the game, or you just bought the game and you want him ahead of time? Yeah, that's fine. That's an option. That's a completely volitional choice by the player. Keithius gifts a member and takes us to 13. There it is. We are now tied with yesterday's record for single gifted train. We're at 9. I think too many people trust what Digital Foundry said about the Pro. How would they know? Yeah, a lot of the commentary around the PS5 Pro, I'm just sort of mental noting all of it because I think it's going to be great when it finally comes out. It's going to be fantastic. You know, the Series S is going to run circles around the PS5. Sure it did. Yeah. It certainly ran in circles, didn't it? Mm-hmm. Tied to a tree, it went nowhere. Congrats. Your hardware is, not doing so hot. Good job. Keep running the early preemptive talking points. It makes it juicy when the stuff finally comes out. Liquid takes us to 10. The single train new record. 10 members in a row. Single gifted. I love seeing so many people throw in. We do not need the big boys. We can do this, man. There's tons of people here. Single gift, it's $5. It gets somebody into the member pool, gets them in our Discord. Adds up quick. We doing a Rise of the Ronin co-op stream this weekend? You said that on Twitter, and I typically don't do anything like that. And Sneaky Wolf comes in and takes it to 11. Keep it going. Although 15 out of 25, tempting a 10 bomb to disrupt the gifted single train. They could ruin it. We're now at 11. I actually think it could be really funny if there was a way for... Another one comes in from Raven and takes us to 16. Oops. And 17. Gifted train. Now we're at 17. That's a 13 single gifted train. Thank you, J-Dog. Thank you, Raven. Somebody said something about, come on, Lono, the goalposts will have shifted 20 times by then. This is true. What are people misunderstanding about this is mostly a GPU upgrade? Really asking, I don't know. I think it's more than that, though. Like, we don't know what the upsampling and the AI is going to do. Like, until we really see it in action. This month's Eknor Award goes to everyone. We're all doing this together. Now, how do we get coffee to everyone? That's right. Yo, what's good, Diablo Dark Matter? I set the record, y'all. Just coming and breaking me. Like, unbelievable. You couldn't give me one day. It's a collective record, right? We're currently at 13 single gifteds in a row. We're at 13. Keep it going. Hilly says, RimWorld has a 98% on Steam. Satisfactory has a 97% on Steam. Valheim has a 94% on Steam. Baldur's Gate 3 has a 96% on Steam. Kerbal Space Program has a 94% on Steam. Would Diablo 4 and Starfield benefited from early access? Undeniable, in my opinion. For a game to be loved, it has to be tested by the player base. Ideology aside, on business practice, but to gain support for any game, you need people to love it. Traditional development can and does work, but even these games are shaped after release. Every game is shaped by its community. Early access, in my eyes, just gets the players involved earlier rather than later. That is so well stated, and with evidence of what early access has done for some games and their review scores. And D Dizzle gifts a member. Thank you so much. There we are, 14 single gifted members in a row. Y'all are the best. You're selfish. I want the trophy. Well, then, Liquid, that's the true competition. You have to decide when you think the final single gifted's going to come in, right? Is it now? Right? Does the current trophy go to D Dizzle? I mean, I don't know. You just gotta gift and find out who ends up being the final one, who gets the final shot. I feel like 10% increase on a closed hardware system is better than a 10% increase in a modular system. But that's just me. Eugene, I like to just wait. We said our piece. We did our shows about the PS5 Pro, and now we just get to wait. And then when it comes out and it's doing its thing, we'll just get to talk about that and say, huh, people really rushed to judgment, didn't they? Siege Master gifts a member, and he goes to Diablo Dark Matter. You love to see it. And another one comes in from Rob V and takes us to 20 members. That's 16 single gifteds in a row. Nobody has ruined the streak with the 5 bomb or a 10 bomb. You guys are running away with it. This is great. Lono doing I told you so video. I've done enough of those for one life. It may be a lot of them. Games may be very GPU bound currently. I think the point is that double frame rate, your CPU has to currently be under like 60% load on the PS5. I don't know what games that's true for. Trill Troll comes in with a single. P-Dub H-Town comes in with a single and takes us to 22. 18 singles in a row. And another one comes in from P-Dub H-Town and takes us to 23. P-Dub's like, let's do a couple of these singles. Chris says, check my last comment. Hang on one second. Yo, Takashi got a gifted. Skill Up was saying that the people at the GDC weren't enthused about the Pro. I don't care. Why would I care about that? Like, did he speak to people who have the dev kit, or did he speak to people that are listening to Digital Foundry? Like, a lot of people's enthusiasm about the Pro went down when Digital Foundry said what they said about GTA 6 and when people started looking at the CPU. Like, I think once again people are rushing to judgment. PWH down with a single. There are all these people saying similar things about the Series S and the PS5. Everybody doubted the PS5. And another one comes from Stone Spire, and he gets us to 25, and P-Dub H-Town ends up being the agent of chaos as we get to 26 members on the day. That's 22 single gifteds in a row. That's the new record. GDC is developers. And how many of those developers have the dev kits? Like, did they actually get it, use it, work with it, and say, yeah, we're not that enthused about it? Again, we've been through this news cycle before. All of the falsehood, all of the bogus claims about what the Series S was going to be able to do and the PS5 wasn't going to look that impressive. And the universe got flipped upside down and all that ended up being wrong. I think we're in the same stupid scenario. We're just in FUD land. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's where we are right now. We've been here before. I have zero confidence in these people that are saying these things. Devs are saying, why a Pro when we haven't even tapped into the full potential of the PS5? Okay, that feedback doesn't even get at the heart of what the Pro is offering. The Pro is offering performance above. Let's say they do start squeezing everything out of the PS5. According to everything we've heard, the PS5 Pro will ask them to do a minimal amount of work to get more performance because it's going to be leveraging AI and upsampling. What the frick are they complaining about then? String isn't doing that. This is not that. I have data on this as Creature. Oh yeah, here, I owe you guys 5. I'm not, you guys want me to do 5 singles? No, my 5 does not count as a disruption of the streak. You guys can keep the single gifted streak going. You're currently at 22, which is incredible. I'll give you the 5 that I owe, though. Some people are behind the skill curve. Feel free to ignore the PS5 Pro. Make more room for the people who want the PS5 Pro. That's what Team Green is claiming. It's Bottleneck City. I once again think that people are 100%. They're doing the exact same thing they did before. Oh, I missed your sub milestone. Sneaky Wolf with 10 months says, Cyberpunk, Outriders, Diablo, Starfield, Mortal Kombat 1, and Jedi all could have done better with early access. I bought all those games unfinished at full price at launch. Thank you, Sneaky Wolf, for 10 months in a VIP. Siege Master, did I miss your re-up? And another single gifted comes in from JC. Thank you so much, taking us to 27. That is 25 single gifted members in a row. Oh, it wasn't yours. It was somebody else's, Siege. Okay. What games currently on or soon will be on the PS5 only have a 30 FPS mode? Yeah, the AI's completely switched what the conversation is about. That might actually hurt us on YouTube, that AI, when that happens, when we switch subjects. Like Insider Gaming. Okay, hang on. Let's okay, Insider Gaming PS5 Pro. Yo, and Ryan comes in with a gifted member, takes us to 28. And Hater, that counts. Hater becomes a brand new member all by themselves. That takes us to 29. 29. Wait, why did I say 25? Now you're at 25 in a row because we had 4 when that started. Yeah, now you're at 25 in a row. That's my bad. Yeah, Hater gifts themselves. Okay, listen to this. The Insider Gaming article. Where's the stats here? Where's the stats that they had, like, internally... They had like some games that had allegedly gotten a bump. Where is that article? And JC comes in with 10 months in a VIP. Lono, you've been crushing it. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much, sir. Is this the one? More specs, detailed. Shoot. And another one comes in from Ryan Hare, gifts it and takes us all the way to 30. Uh-oh. 30 out of 50. You guys might be tempting a 20 bomb. They're going to ruin it. Currently, you have 26 single gifteds in a row. We'll see if you guys can keep the train going. I'm trying to find this freaking Insider Gaming article that had, like, it had the games. Okay, here we go. Here we go. So this is according to Insider Gaming. All right. I'm going to put this on the screen so you guys can see it. Okay. So standard PlayStation, 1080-60 fidelity, 1830, and on the Pro they were getting 1440-60. Okay, and Game 2, standard PlayStation 5 achieved 60 FPS without ray tracing. The PlayStation 5 Pro achieved 60 FPS with ray tracing. Okay, so I think developers aren't seeing the forest for the trees if they're like, yeah, we're not really enthused about that. It's like, do you understand what they're giving you? They're giving you a way of doing the things that you've been wanting to do. More ray tracing, yeah, without having to sacrifice frames per second. And again, for developers, 4 years into the life cycle of the PS5 to be like, yeah, we haven't really tapped into the full power of the PS5. Okay, well then do that. That has nothing to do with the Pro. The Pro is using its own proprietary upsampling to get more performance even when you turn on something like ray tracing. It's not going to require you to do all this new and extra work. It sounds like, again, people are speaking out of turn. People did They did the same dadgum thing with the Series S and the PS5 when we knew virtually nothing. And they started talking with all this confidence about what we were going to get and what was going to happen. And they deal in fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And they're doing the same thing. I can't turn off the AI chat summary. I don't think I have the ability to do that barrier. Like, I need everybody to start talking about Elder Scrolls 6 right now. I'm shocked that nobody here has called themselves Raymond Tracing. This is not that. I have an article. This is not that. You keep saying that, but you won't elaborate. Like, okay. What? I'm not saying that. Somebody said that Skill Up spoke with devs that were not that enthused about it. This isn't even remotely what Dring is saying. Well, what is Dring saying then? Digital Foundry was taking a brute force view on clock speed, which is not a good way to measure performance. That throughput bandwidth is what they need to look at to offload the CPU. He's being misrepresented. I'm excited to see Elder Scrolls 6, but if there is a single loading screen, it'll be dead on arrival. Oh, he's not saying they're not excited about it. Well, the person in chat didn't say that Dring said that. They said that Skill Up said that. Very few people have the metal in their hands. Even fewer have experience with it. Yeah, like parroting the talking point of, well, we barely tapped into the power of the PS5. Why do we need a PS5 Pro? Okay, people said that 7 months ago. They're just saying it again. Like, and I'm supposed to believe that, like, that's a compelling argument that, like, yeah, devs just don't see the point in getting more power and being able to do more ray tracing and not losing frames per second when you do more ray tracing. You think devs are like, yeah, I don't really understand why you'd give us more upsampling and increased performance. I don't know why you would do that. They're saying that they haven't even started getting the most out of the base 5, so they don't understand why the Pro is even a thing. Right, and that's been said for a while now. Alex from Digital Foundry said that, 5 months ago? That's been said for a while. There's nothing wrong with that viewpoint, but it's just becoming a talking point. It's like, well, have you even looked into what you'll have to do? Have you even looked into what it will do with your game if you, let's say right now, you focus on squeezing everything you can out of a PS5? Does the Pro disrupt that, or does it complement that? From what we've read, it'll simply complement the work that you've done. Oh, yeah. Your ray tracing mode, yeah, you get better frames now. Yeah, you can get 60 with your ray tracing mode. Okay, great. We were doing a ray tracing mode that's at 30, and then we were doing a performance mode that was at 1440, 60. Oh, no, yeah. You're going to get better performance on the Pro now. Keep doing that. Keep squeezing everything you can out of the PS5. It has no bearing on the Pro. The Pro is going to come behind you and enable you to get more out of those modes that you've built. Well, let me play Spider-Man 2 with full ray tracing, 60 FPS instead of 30. Yup, take my money. That's what I'm saying. I think we're getting lost in the weeds on this. See, everybody's acting on the presumption that these developers are going to have to start doing all this extra work to target the Pro, and it's like, we haven't even finished optimizing and getting everything we can out of the PS5. Great, don't stop doing that. The Pro isn't asking you to do all this extra work. It's offering the ability to do upsampling that will then take all of your work and squeeze more out of it. Oh, you're ray tracing 30? It's now a ray tracing 60. According to the leaks, it's going to take very little work from the developers to leverage this. It's not asking them to go back and do all this extra stuff. People don't understand what they're talking about. They're speaking out of turn. It's like, you're doing great work, right? You've got a great ray tracing mode and a great performance mode. Cool. The Pro isn't disrupting that. It isn't. Final Fantasy 16 with a smooth 60 FPS, take my money. So many good examples of this. All these games already have a 60 mode, so the CPU can put out 60 frames. The CPU isn't the limit. Right. Interesting, isn't it? If a game is hitting 60 right now, and you add ray tracing and you lose that, I wonder what an upgraded GPU and I wonder what an upsampler could do with that. Isn't that interesting? It's like all of a sudden you have more GPU power. It's like all of a sudden you have upsampling, so you could probably even take some of the workload of the GPU down by going internal resolution 1080 and then letting the upsampler take it even higher, which then allows you to get more frames, which then allows you to have ray tracing turned on. Oh my gosh, it's almost like if you squeeze everything that you could possibly can out of the PS5 Pro is going to complement your work, not ask you to do more. Everything I've read from Insider Gaming, every single thing we've read from the sources about how this is going to work and what it's targeting, I don't know why developers would be like, I don't get it. What's the point of this? Why do we need this? We haven't even squeezed everything we could out of the PS5. Have you read any of the briefings on it and how it works? Like, what are you talking about? I need Lono to get the PS5 Pro so he can stop talking crap about my favorite game of 2023. I would like to go back and I would like to go back and play it. I'd like to go back and finish it. According to Yoshi P, Final Fantasy 16 will get a performance patch with a new expansion next month. It won't hit 60, but it should be better than before. Where was this stated, Fitness? Did he do an interview and state that? I've not seen that. That excites me. I think we might be not understanding what the devs meant. They aren't dumb. I'm not saying that they're dumb. I'm saying that it sounds like an ideological position. Why is the PS5 Pro even a thing? We haven't gotten all the power out of the PS5 yet. Okay. Like I said, this was said 7 months ago. You're not saying anything. You're not. You're coming from a belief. This seems out of turn. Why is this even a thing? Let me ask you something. Game developer, why is there a new GPU? Why is there a new CPU? Why is there a new memory? Why? Why are these new pieces of hardware coming out for the PC? You haven't even gotten all the power out of the previous batch of cards. See how stupid that sounds? Like, what are we even talking about? Oh, we just got to the point that we were squeezing everything we could out of these GPUs and this DLSS. Why bring new tech out? What the frick? They never question new GPUs. What makes the difference? Why comment now? I mean, I would imagine that this would be their response. They would say, okay, Lono, there's a huge difference between suddenly having more power in a GPU and we're getting really, really good at building games for this closed ecosystem on the PS5. And just when we're getting really good at that, there's now suddenly a new PS5 Pro. So they're like, what are you doing? We're just now to the point where we're really digging into the guts of the PS5 and you're adding another SKU. But again, it feels like a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Pro is offering. The Pro is not coming along and saying, oh yeah, brand new ecosystem for you to develop for. So everything you just finally got really good at on the PS5, yeah, throw that out the window. Now you got to start developing for the Pro. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how the Pro is going to operate. They're not suddenly having to build for a new console. It's not like the PS6. If the PS6 was suddenly dropping on the market, I would understand the question of like, what? But the Pro is not targeting like, oh yeah, now you got to develop for this. They literally developed the technology, and the way it's been described and the way that I understand it is, this has been developed to raise what you've already built. Not suddenly require you to start doing more or learning more or building differently. It feels like they're passing in the night. They're viewing it as something that it's not and then asking the question like, why does this even exist? And it's like, okay, let's look at Spider-Man 2 as an example. everything we've read, those devs should be able to go back into Spider-Man 2, and from what we've learned, do minimal work, and their ray tracing mode suddenly is getting better frames, and their performance mode is suddenly getting a better resolution. Wow, they did a great job squeezing all this power out of the PS5, and the Pro gets more. You could do the same thing as a developer. Just target the PS5. Keep doing what you're doing. You're going to want to have a good release for the PS5 anyway, because there's 50 million of them in circulation. There's going to be way more PS5 consumers than PS5 Pro consumers. So you still have a very strong vested interest in having an amazing PS5 version. And then the Pro gives you the ability to have a better ray tracing mode and a better performance mode. Like, that's the selling point of the device. You know who took advantage of the PS4 Pro? Sony devs. Third party can do whatever they want. Another great point. Another great point. The Sony devs are probably going to be the primary ones that leverage this. Why? They got their hands on the dev kits first. It's probably why first-party devs are virtually non-existent this year. Why? They probably internally delayed everything to say, hey, you're going to want to launch and be PS5 Pro optimized. Ghost of Tsushima 2, whoever else has gone quiet or was internally delayed. We know they internally delayed games end of last year. See my counter above. Sure, but they still have to put effort into maximizing the return from the Pro. The good devs aren't just going to use the default settings. It's more work and worry for them. That's fair. Sure, that's fair. And guess what? They don't have to. They could do it later. Right? They don't have to. There's no giant impetus to be like, it's not like if they don't do the work for the Pro, like it's going to hurt their sales. The vast majority of the consumer base isn't going to be like, is it optimized for the Pro? They're going to say, is it good? Is it awesome? When's the release date? What do I get? And they're going to buy it. And then they could push out a patch later and say, hey, we pushed out a PS5 Pro patch. Like, I totally get that. That's fair that they're like, well, that is going to require more work from us. That's fair, but you don't have to. It's going to be the smallest slice of the PlayStation audience. You can always do it later, depending on your commercial success. And if we're honest, if the game looks good and the game runs well, it's not like PS5 Pro guys are going to be snobs and be like, I can't believe these guys didn't make this game optimized for the PS5 Pro. Like, that's not going to be a thing. Well, I'm not going to buy it then. Now they have to ship two versions, the PS5 and the PS5 Pro editions. It could be a bit more work. We don't know if it's like completely separate versions, Abe, because again, leveraging an upscaler doesn't necessarily mean it's a different version of the ray tracing mode. It's the ray tracing mode, and the GPU and the upscaler is going to do all this work to give you better frames in that ray tracing mode. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it's not like shipping a completely different version like you have to with like the Series S, where your base level resolution is lower and you have to cut ray tracing out of the game. You can't put it in there. That's completely different than saying your ray tracing mode will run better on this if you go in and leverage the upscaler, if you go in and leverage the technology that we're giving you in the PSSR. So, my gut, every time this comes up, my gut says we've been here before. We've been in Fudville before. FUD, F-U-D, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We've been here before. And there's always this concerted effort to cast all this fear, all this uncertainty and doubt on PlayStation. And then the PS5 walks out on the battlefield and makes everybody look stupid. Go back in time, look at the dialogue. Are there any PlayStation 5 trailers that have been set to private? Like, who should we really have doubts about here? Like, whose hardware quite literally didn't do what the marketing said to the point that you had to privatize your own dadgum video? And funny enough, that's the side that deals in this more than anybody. Don't you think that's interesting? Don't you think that's a strange coincidence? The hardware that basically has fallen flat on its face. Right? Which side should we be really concerned about hardware? Like, everybody's like, oh yay, we might get a handheld. Oh yay, they're going to really answer back with hardware. Why in the frick would you be confident in that side's hardware? They're going to have to privatize more videos in the future? Were those people devs asking legitimately? Yes. I literally have seen receipt pulls of devs or people saying they spoke to devs that said the PS5 is just not going to be there. It's just not going to be as strong. Brother, we have been here before. It's literally like a stopped clock. We're coming right back around to the hands of our, yep, it's 12 o'clock. We've been here before. There was all this wild speculation about how, the PS5 is just not going to be as good. It's just not going to be as strong. The Series S is going to run circles around the PS5. People saying, I've spoken to devs chiming in. There are all these tweets. Yeah, how'd that work out? How did all that work out? You got a privatized marketing video for Xbox, and you have an undeniable trend of better performance on the PS5. It's not even a question anymore. Who has more 60 FPS games? Who has more next-gen games? Who has more consistent performance? Who's got the bottleneck? Who's got the problem child? And it ain't PlayStation. People put a lot of emphasis on variable rate shaders. There was commentary about the teraflops. There was commentary about the shaders. There was commentary about RDNA. And it all turned out to be bogus. So if developers are once again, casting doubt or being skeptical or podcasts or, Xbox talking heads are running with FUD, let them. Let them. Because they've done it before and it didn't work. And they're doing it again, and dollars to donuts, it ain't gonna work. You're not going to walk into the marketplace with a PS5 Pro, likely at $600, that's bottlenecked and crappy and devs don't like it. There's zero reason for us to think that. I have a massive amount of confidence in the fact that Cerny is delivering what developers wanted, what developers were asking for. It's why the dev kits went to first party first. It just hasn't made landfall yet. It'll make landfall. All these studios are going to start saying, oh my gosh, we get it now. Okay, yeah, all the light bulbs will start going off. You don't send something like this into the market haphazardly. You don't. The amount of research that went into this, come on. And you're going to believe a bunch of FUD? That's not a fair argument. The hardware in the Xbox consoles are great. It's the games on the hardware that have been butt. What are you talking about? Have you seen any of the side-by-side comparisons of all of the litany of games this generation and how badly they run on the Series S? What are you even talking about? The Series S marketing was so bad, so misleading, and so untrue that Xbox privatized the video. They set it to private because it isn't true. Like, the Series X is great, but it's tied to a younger, weaker stepbrother. It can only run as fast as it's going to run, to a certain degree. Aren't the PS5 and the X virtually identical? Yeah, one's got a slightly stronger GPU, one's got a slightly stronger CPU. All the tech breakdowns basically said they were, equal. The S has always been the problem. I was called a hater when I said this 2 years ago. I said the Series S is going to cause developers to either want to skip the Series S or skip Xbox altogether. And that's happening now. Right now, it's happening. You had people coming back from Gamescom saying that they didn't like the Series S. And we're now hearing that third-party developers are questioning even putting games on Xbox. Like, it's all coming home to roost. All of it is. Because you can't hobble and hamstring your entire hardware generation and expect developers to be excited about that. Like, we're going to sit here and run FUD on the PS5 Pro while people spent years defending the Series S? Are you freaking kidding me right now? Are we actually doing this? We've spent years listening to nonsense and hand-waving and PR talking points about the Series S not being a problem, and now it's completely reared its head as a problem to the point that even the Xbox guys have finally admitted it's a problem. And you're going to listen to these same people spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt about a PS5 Pro after years of nonsense and denial about the Series S? Really? That's what we're going to do? Come on. What are we doing here? The thing I don't get is, if you just want to downgrade the GPU in the S, lower resolution for less cost, why do they gimp the memory that the CPU also needs? It's a great question. When we had the argument regarding teraflops, we were looking at the Series X and the PS5 specs on paper. We didn't know Xbox was going to fumble the ball so hard. Yeah, but it was more than that, Abe. It was more than that. I've seen the receipt polls. There were people that were saying the PS5 is just not going to be there. It's just not going to be very strong. It's just not going to be a very impressive device. There was all this skepticism. It was the same thing. It was, I've spoken to devs, and devs are saying this. And then there were devs weighing in on Twitter and being like, yeah, I think the Series X is going to win this round. You've been saying this, Reforge, and I've been agreeing with you this whole time, and this whole time being called ponies, and it's laughable now. How did everyone not see this coming? Like, this has come up a handful of times recently, and obviously it's not really on topic with, you know, Elder Scrolls and early access. We kind of ran the course of that discussion. We're having to go a little bit longer today. In about 20 minutes, we're going to shift gears to the. We'll go live a little early for the Kill the Justice League stream. But I just don't put a lot of stock into what people are saying right now. I don't. Because it's the same thing. It generates clicks. Like, how many articles and videos have you seen that were like, PS5 Pro is going to run GTA 6 at 30 FPS? Right? You've seen a lot of them. It generates clicks, and no one knows. No one has any certainty on the subject, and yet that's everywhere now. Articles, YouTube videos, tweets, thousands upon thousands of clicks, impressions, and ad revenue dollars on literally nothing. Literally no concrete information, nothing at all to concretely come to these conclusions. And it's now canon. It's everywhere. It's headcanon in the gaming world. PS5 Pro is pointless, it's bottlenecked, and it's going to run GTA 6 at 30 FPS. Okay. All right. Make it easier for me to buy one, I guess. I'm saying it was both the Series X and the PS5 are fantastic consoles. It was fair to compare specs on paper when they were announced. It's everything besides hardware with the X that was the problem. But again, Abe, you're missing the other thing in the room, which was all of the commentary about the PS5 not being good enough, strong enough. It was going to lag behind. There was tons of commentary about that. And it was all expressed before anything was in the market, before we had our hands on anything. And then the games started dropping. And here we are 4 years in to the life cycle. And everything that was said before the consoles came out all looks incredibly stupid right now. So right now, we're in the same exact valley. The valley of we don't really know yet. Rockstar got Red Dead 2 running on a PS4, no open world. has matched that realism, and now we're speculating they won't manage 60 FPS on a PS5 standard. Let's wait and see. How do we know that GTA 6 won't have a performance mode? I'm telling you, Zubair, that's it. We don't know. We don't know. And let's say it comes out and GTA 6 can't hit 60 on a Series X. It can't hit 60 on a PS5. Okay? The only reason people were right is by pure luck. It wasn't based on actual, evidence or logic. It was just a guess. It was like, well, it's going to be a really big game, so it'll probably be 30 FPS. It'll be a CPU intensive game, so it's probably going to hit a bottleneck and it'll be 30 FPS. And it's like, okay, what if it's not? What if they figure out a way to do render distance limitations and dynamic resolution? And what if they figure out systems with their AI to limit memory consumption? And what if they figure out ways to give you a performance mode that can give you 60? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying it's going to be. I'm not saying either way. I keep saying we don't know. Not luck, but going off the history of their games. I would just question why they would update GTA 5 to 60 FPS then. That decision seems strange to me. They took the time to bring GTA 5 up to 60, and you have all those people playing at 60, and then they're going to get a new game that is not going to be 60. That seems like a very bad decision in my estimation. Now, they're such a big and popular game that a lot of people are going to be like, it won't matter. Okay, you're probably right. But again, we don't know. It's knowing the company and understanding how a CPU works. You understand how the CPU interacts with GTA 6? That's incredible. And how many console gens did that take? Took 2 gens. Okay. You don't think that maybe that entire time that was then helping them with GTA 6? You think they spent 2 generations figuring out how to get GTA 5 to 60 just because they felt like it? You think they just thought this will be a fun thing to throw bandwidth at? Do you ever think about that? They spent 2 generations working on, testing, trying to, okay, we finally can do it. You think they did all that and they're like, that was fun? Do you think maybe they did that because they were trying to figure out if it was possible to do that in GTA 6? Do you think maybe they did that because they thought there's a lot of architecture and pipeline similarities between the 2 games? So let's use that game as a test case to see if this is even going to be a possibility. That to me would be a pretty compelling reason to try to get your previous game to 60 so that you could be like, okay, this is what is going to be required for us to get 60 out of GTA 6. You're going to have to drop the resolution to this low. You're going to have to do this with render distance, with volumetric fog, with how many AIs are alive in a certain instance, or however far you want to have them active, in the world, how many persistent objects you're going to have in a given, square mile radius, like all those things that they figured out, like, okay, this is how we're going to do it. That very likely could have helped them be like, oh yeah, we can now do 60 in GTA 6. We're going to have to turn a lot of stuff off. Trailers are usually 30. I think it's to get the best looking screenshots. Doesn't Sony? Yeah, most trailers are at 30. The trailers being at 30 doesn't mean anything. There are a litany of games that we've faced this before. People are like, no, it's going to be 30, dude. The trailers are 30. And I'm like, trailers are almost always 30. What are you talking about? It's very common for trailers to be at 30. I'm not saying it will be 60. I'm not saying it won't be 30. I'm saying people are speaking so definitively about the PS5 Pro and about GTA 6. And I just feel like I've heard this song and dance before. And it all seems to come from the same people. Trailers don't show any gameplay. Yeah, it's just cinematics. Which is normal at this point in time. To only show cinematics. Give me 1 second. The graphical fidelity of GTA 5 is not even in the same universe as 6. How do you know that? And how do you know they're not willing to let you turn a lot of that stuff off to get 60? What's the graphical fidelity of GTA 6? What is it? Do you know? Have they shown us gameplay? Do we have breakdowns of draw distance? Lighting? Textures? Resolution? Do we have any of that right now? We don't. We don't have any of those things right now. You see what I'm saying? The headcanon has taken root, and people think they know. They're like, oh no, yeah, the graphical fidelity of GTA 6. What are you talking about? We don't know anything. We've not seen anything. We have no idea. Isn't the trailer pre-rendered? We don't even know what the game will actually look like. Developer said the game looks exactly like what was shown in the trailer. They said that. They said that the gameplay was going to look exactly like the trailer. Where did they say that? They said on record our game is going to look exactly like that trailer. That they got some stones to say that, if they actually said that. I've not seen that interview. I don't know if that was stated. Where did they say that? I don't think I've ever seen a developer that's like, yeah, dude, our game's going to look exactly like that cinematic trailer. They did? Source it. Where'd they say it? Who did they say it to? I want to see the exact quote. I want to see how they phrased it. I want to see the words that they used. I've been told this kind of thing before, and then we look into it, and it's not what was claimed. So where was it said? Who did they say it to? Those were not cinematic? Yeah, there was a cinematic trailer. It wasn't a gameplay trailer. You understand when we say cinematic, we're not saying that it wasn't necessarily in engine. We're just saying it was a cinematic. It wasn't raw gameplay. It wasn't somebody running around playing the game. It was a dev replying to someone on Twitter. Dev, GTA 6 will look like the trailer. Rockstar developer says GTA 6 will look as good as the trailer. Let's go look at the exact quotation. It was a former developer. He says, I'm really impressed with how far they're bringing the graphics for an in-game kind of version of this. A lot of times you see cinematics used. This is not that. When you play this game, it's really going to look like this. Okay. That's not somebody at the company right now. So I don't know if I would take that to the bank, because we have been here before. We have been here before. The trailers look crazy, and then the game comes out and it's a little not as good. I don't know if I would take that to the bank just yet, all right? GTA 6 is probably going to be dope. But if you think the game's going to look like that on console, I think you need to really temper those expectations. You really need to temper those expectations. The use of lighting and shadows alone, it just seems, I don't know, unless they really came up with some development ninjutsu, dude, no. Even at 30 FPS, I don't think so. No. I wouldn't take that to the bank. It's an ex-developer, you know, and they're speaking glowingly, right? They're like, that's going to look like that, right? Okay, well, within reason, yeah, it's going to look like that. Is it going to look exactly like that? Or is the lighting and the shadows going to look that good? Probably not. That's why people say it's 30. I've not seen anybody make that argument, Crowded, so I think what you're saying is false. I don't think I've seen a lot of people say, well, it's going to be 30 because this ex-developer said it was going to look as good as the trailer. That's not what I've seen people say. I've seen people say a game this big, a game that looks that nice, it's going to be CPU intensive, it's going to be 30 on the consoles. I've not seen anybody be like, well, an ex-developer said. That's simply not true. I've not seen that argument trotted out by anybody. Now, if somebody trotted out that argument, I've just not seen it. The argumentations have been a lot more simplistic. I've not seen people like citing an ex-developer in their arguments. It's been games of this size and that level of graphical fidelity. It's just going to be too much for these systems to hit 60. Didn't GTA 5 ending up looking like the trailers? That doesn't mean that the games will look like the trailers now. There's been plenty of games that look like their trailers, and then there are games that don't. There are games that end up not looking like their trailers. And again, you don't know if their willingness to do all that work with GTA 5 helped them figure out we're able to have a performance mode. We can give you guys 60. Now, sometimes it might dip, sometimes it might not be there, but with dynamic resolution and other tricks, they might be able to give us a performance mode. Again, we just don't know. Eugene says, shocker, final game cutscenes look like trailer cutscenes. We're looking at cutscenes. Stop. Yes, can we please say that as well? We're looking at cutscenes. We're looking at cinematics that will likely look like that when the game ships. That doesn't mean that gameplay will look like that. It's a cinematic trailer. Like, if you gave me a cinematic trailer right now for a game coming out in 5 years, I have no reason to think that cinematic sequence will look bad when the game comes out. Why? It's a cinematic. It's pre-rendered. It's a movie file that runs. It's not having to run in engine. It's literally just like, yep, play it. We push play on that pre-rendered movie file. That doesn't mean the game's going to look like that. Virtually every game you play right now, the cutscenes generally look better than in-game. Even if it's an in-engine cutscene, it looks better. Why? Because it's been pre-rendered. They don't have to do it right there with your system's power. They were able to do more with the lighting. They were able to increase the resolution. They were able to add maybe more texture or more vibrancy to the NPCs' faces and their eyes. Like, generally speaking, cutscenes look better than gameplay in virtually all games that we play right now. So you're looking at a bunch of cutscenes from GTA 6, and you're like, yeah, the game's going to look like that. What the heck? Why do you think that? I've never seen a cutscene in a game and thought, yep, the game's going to look like that. I've never thought that. I don't know why you would. Even games like I feel like the game that we're getting ready to go and watch a stream about, like Kill the Justice League. I actually think the characters look phenomenal in game. They look quite good. But when you're actually in the game versus the cutscenes, there's a greater level of detail on the characters. There's greater levels of detail of lighting and the world itself. Like, why? Well, because it's a fully rendered scene. they're able to turn some of those things up. It's not as taxing on your rig or your console because it's just a video file that they made. Hang on. I'm scheduling the Justice League stream right now. Yeah, there's a live stream today in 30 minutes. They can boost the lighting, the character details, environmental details because nothing else is running. If you have come to the conclusion that it'll be 30 and you're setting that expectation for yourself, that's totally fine. I don't have any problem with that. I don't have any problem with people being like, it's going to be 30, the graphics, the ambition, just the history of the company. We're not going to get 60, right? And you can cite an era where their games were at 30 when all other games were at 30 as if that's evidence, which that's not evidence. Virtually all games back then that were open world in that size were 30. It was not an expectation that games would offer a performance mode. It was not an expectation that games would offer 60. So it's not compelling at all to go to an era of gaming where that was not an expectation. Nobody thought that was going to happen. So nobody was booting up Red Dead Redemption 2. Nobody was booting up Grand Theft Auto 5 and thinking, I better get 60 FPS. It wasn't an expectation back then. So even citing the history of their games is not compelling proof at all. Would you have said, yeah, Horizon Forbidden West is probably going to be 30. Well, the last game was 30. Yeah, God of War Ragnarok's going to be 30 because God of War 2018 was 30. That would be, with all due respect, that would be a stupid argument because you're going to an era where 60 wasn't even the expectation. So that's not a compelling argument either. Using a history of games and a time where virtually everything was 30. Right? I just don't find it compelling. Now, is Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League? Are they going to be doing? What's their YouTube channel? Yeah, I don't know what they're going to be doing. We're just going to have the channel pulled up and just keep refreshing. There we go. When did this game start development? I don't know. Horizon Forbidden West and God of War Ragnarok likely started development right after those games shipped. GTA cutscenes and Red Dead cutscenes are not pre-rendered. They don't work like most games, I promise you. Look it up. I believe it may even look better than what we saw. The XDev explains it all. If you expect me to believe all of those cutscenes that we saw from the GTA 6 trailer, if you expect me to believe that those cutscenes are not pre-rendered, I don't believe that at all. That's not how trailers are made. That's not how trailers are made. They don't go in-engine and float the camera around and make the engine and the hardware do all the work. It's all pre-rendered. They tell it to do everything on a monster rig. It does everything, and then it records it. They're not actively booting up the game and recording everything in engine raw. Now they'll do that for gameplay, but not for cinematic trailers. Yeah, photo mode's in engine, sure, and it can turn everything up and it can look really impressive. How much time do I have? All right, I got to make a couple of changes and then we got to switch streams. They're not pre-rendered. You're literally wrong. Sure. Okay. Fine. Yep. A trailer that is nothing but cinematics and cutscenes isn't pre-rendered. Okay, cool. The history of trailers that look like that, they're the one company that decided to not do it that way. Okay. And again, if you think a game is going to look at the same graphical fidelity as cinematic trailers, I think you are in for a rude awakening when the game lands. I think you're in for a rude awakening. Games almost never look like their cinematic trailers. They almost never look as good as their cinematics. Y'all are passing the night based on the use of pre-rendered. If I'm using the wrong word, fine. That's not the point. The point is, when they put those trailers together, it's not raw gameplay. It's everything's been turned up because it's a cinematic. Like, that's the point that I'm trying to make. If you think a game is going to look as good as its cinematics, I don't know why you think that. We don't have any reason within the history of games to think that. We've got to go. I don't want this stream to hit 3 hours. There's a link in chat. We're shifting gears. We are going to be going and co-streaming the showcase of Kill the Justice League Season 1. I've got concerns. Let's go check it out. Thanks so much for checking this out. This is going to be my co-stream of the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League Season 1 showcase. Now, I'm on their YouTube channel. I don't know if this is going to be like a pre-recorded premiere that they just push live. I don't know if it's going to be like a live stream that suddenly shows up. They don't have a live tab here. So I'm assuming it's going to be some type of a pre-recorded premiere walking through all the Season 1 stuff. I'm going to end the previous stream where we were talking about Elder Scrolls and 6 and why I think it should be early access. And I'm going to bring you guys over with Redirect. Make sure as you guys come over, you smash the like button. And